Today on
Doomed!
Pay attention to your local races, everybody, because that's where the far right is focusing. On today's show, on today's episode, I should say, of Doomed with Matt Binder, we'll be looking into a new report from the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights about how the far right is breaching the mainstream, how they've so far successfully infiltrated state politics. And let me pull up my guest who's going to run down and break down and get us all in tune with what's going on here in this new report. Give me 1 second. We're having a little tech thing. Here we go. Okay, here we go. Joining me now, he's the executive director of the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights, Devin Burghart. Devin, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, Matt, what's up?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in the world, isn't there? And
yeah.
it seems like none of it is good, right?
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah, and this report is also not good, but I think this report, unlike the other horrible things that happen where there is no, I guess, upside, I think the upside in this report is that hopefully, it's a warning to people to start paying attention to local statewide races. I mean, I do think that I could go down the line here. Democrats, progressives, leftists, everyone left of center has sort of dropped the ball here when it comes to the attention given to statewide races. We can talk really local races like, school board and county whatevers. You'll break down some more, I'm sure. But even to state legislatures, which this report really does focus on, the people who make the laws in the state where you live, where, the federal government says, hey, it's up to the states. We pay a lot of attention to national politics and, U.S. Congress members that we're seeing a lot of these far right, individuals sort of realize this and take advantage and saying, hey, we could sneak on in here and take over politics, at least at the state level, and then down the line again, to local and such. And we can, for the things that the federal government has over us, fine. But for the things that the state controls, that's ours, baby. I mean, that's what we're seeing here, right?
Absolutely. I think that, over the last 6 months or so, a lot of people have caught on to the far right's efforts to do things like infiltrate school boards because of, the fights over critical race theory and, anti-trans stuff. But I think still missing in that middle is the attention that needs to be paid to what's happening in state legislatures. So in the wake of January 6th, we wanted to spend a lot of time kind of in a concentrated way getting a sense of what this looked like at a national level. Because, we all knew the anecdotes, right? We knew about characters like Wendy Rogers in Arizona or Matt Shea here in Washington State or, a few others like that. But we didn't really have any sense of how far right politics had penetrated down into the mainstream. That there's that old adage that the states are the laboratories of democracy. But what we found in doing this work is that in many respects, they've become a Frankenstein-like space for the worst kinds of anti-human rights and anti-democracy legislation being promoted by various individuals who have joined far-right Facebook groups.
Right. So let's talk. Let's go. Like, this is for people. First of all, people should really go check out this report. It's there's a description in the YouTube link, in the YouTube description. Excuse me. There's a link in the YouTube description and a link on the public Patreon post for the show, for this episode. It's a very comprehensive report. It really goes. It's just not like, here's a few people. We get down to the numbers here. in terms of, which, how many laws they've been involved with shaping and getting done in terms of legislative impact. So please check out the report, because in our even if we talk for an hour, like you and I have gone before when you've been on this show, we are not going to get to break down every aspect of this report. It's just not possible. So please, everyone go check out the link. But let's first, I guess, talk about some of these legislators, excuse me. You brought up Wendy Rogers. I haven't really, I probably mentioned her when it's come up on the second half of the show where, someone will send me a tweet maybe or a clip, but I haven't really done anything on her yet. And for people who, who's Wendy Rogers? She is, she's from Arizona. You've probably seen her tweets going around. She's easily probably one of the most prolific state legislators in terms of like an online presence who's like super far right. And I'm even going to say not just like, there's obviously huge overlap, but like full on like conspiracy theorists too. Like obviously they're one and the same sometimes, but she is one and the same for sure. So tell us a little bit about, Wendy Rogers and, how influential someone like her is in their, in their state.
We started the piece with an anecdote about Wendy Rogers and her visit to Idaho to speak at a rally for Janice McGeehan and a bunch of other far-right legislators in that state. So, it's not every day that a state senator travels halfway, across the country to speak at another rally. But for Wendy Rogers, she did it because she's got a lot of interesting ties. The first thing where she's tied into folks in Idaho and other state legislators around the country is she is one of the most active and prolific voices on Telegram and other places in the election denial scene. She was very involved with the audit down in Arizona when they were, fraudulently trying to recount the ballots. She continues to go around talking about how the election was stolen and that, something needs to be done about it. So she's got that side of her work. But what also makes her interesting is she also has a bridge to the white nationalists. She was one of the figures who spoke at the last America First Political Action Conference. The group headed up by Nick Fuentes and the so-called Groypers. She was one of those figures, like, other figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Paul Gosar, who we know as federal legislators. But she was one of these state legislators who gave a presentation and really helped kind of, again, provide legitimacy for this group of white nationalists. She is, sadly to say, only one of 875 legislators that we documented in this report. That's legislators in all 50 states.
Say that number again.
875.
All right. So I want to be clear. We're not talking about, because I don't want anyone listening, and this is obviously not the majority of my audience, but I don't want anyone listening thinking like, oh, 875 far-right state legislators. What are they? For lower taxes, or they're just like they want like a little bit stronger gun rights or something like that, or they're for free speech? No. What are we talking about here when we classify 875 state legislators as far-right?
No, we do a really clear, bright line about this. The first thing is what we're not talking about. We're not talking about mainstream conservatives or free speech advocates. We're not talking about even groups like the NRA or National Review or any of those, establishment conservative groups. We're talking about groups that are dedicated to passing legislation that is designed to curtail equity around race, gender, sexual orientation, immigration status, national origins, etc. Right? These are the worst of the worst. In this list, it includes membership of far-right legislators in militia groups, in sovereign citizen groups, in groups that are designed to promote the hardest edge of the COVID denial world. It includes anti-vaxxers. It includes folks who when they talk about gun rights, they're talking about engaging in a second civil war. So we're not talking about your average everyday conservative. We're talking about those groups who fit into this far right category. And to put that number 875 into context, that's over 11.8% of all legislators in the country, or since all but 3 of them are Republican, it means that that's roughly 22% of all Republican state legislators fall into this category.
So, so I'm really trying to take this in. So you said it's across all 50 states. We got what are some of the states we're looking at in terms of the highest concentration of these? And also, I want to make it clear, these are people who are already in office. I know there are a lot of
Correct. Yeah.
Yes, I know there are a lot of great organizations that track. Oh, this QAnon person is running for office, and now we've got a total of 80 QAnon believers running for office, and obviously that's important reporting too. But this report solely deals with people already in office.
Correct. It's folks who were in office during the last legislative cycle, the 2021-2022 legislative cycle. And so, to answer your question about where these groups are popular, for instance, in New Hampshire, there are 62 legislators that fall into that category. And it's a bit of an outlier, in part because New Hampshire has about 400 state legislators in their 2 branches of their system. But there's still a lot. Pennsylvania has 40 legislators in these groups, Minnesota 39, Missouri 36, Arkansas and Maine and Montana all have 34, Georgia 32, Washington 30, and Maryland 27.
Jeez.
That's the top 10. But what we found is that these were, in terms of overall membership, they were spread almost uniformly across all regions. So in the South, there were 264 of these folks. In the Midwest, 221. In the West, 200. And the Northeast, 191. So that's a remarkably even spread for what we've seen in terms of activity, and certainly in terms of the kind of composition of legislatures. So it was shocking to us to see this number of folks involved in this number of groups.
So in the report, we have who are some of the because I know you pull out. How did you determine which of these 875 to specifically sort of profile? Because there's a few that you profile and go further into. What was the deciding factor on who you focus on in this report?
Well, when we did the top 10 individuals that we profiled in the middle of the report, we wanted to look at those folks who had some kind of unique characteristics. But we also wanted to try to give a spread in terms of gender balance and in terms of regional focus. So we looked at individuals who represented various elements of this movement. One of those was a guy by the name of Jim Walsh. He's a Washington state legislator. He was selected because amongst all of those individuals on this list, he had joined the most groups. He, in fact, had joined 24 different far-right groups. That includes a number of far-right paramilitary groups, like the 3 Percenters. It includes. Oh, go ahead.
How did you determine which groups they were a part of? Are we looking at like online affiliation, or did you even go further and get like offline affiliation too, like real life connections?
This is all based on their Facebook membership.
Right.
So this is all based on the Facebook group membership. We have other data that shows some of these individuals involved in the everyday offline world with some of these groups. But to get a kind of comprehensive national coverage, we found that Facebook groups served as a pretty good proxy for us to get a sense of the spread of this. And so far, it's been pretty accurate in terms of determining a kind of level of involvement.
Right. And are you able to tell how active they are in these groups? Was that?
Yeah, that's another thing we looked at is, the level of which they're participating. So in a bunch of cases, it's more often than not that the legislators are providing their imprimatur to the group by being a member, right? It provides them legitimacy and normalizes them a little bit. And it also then provides them, at minimum, a pipeline for that misinformation and conspiracy theories to flow into the legislators. So in that case, we're seeing quite often is that for those legislators who don't actively participate, they're still, inundated with this never-ending stream of misinformation that does, as I think we'll talk about later, have an impact on the kind of legislation that they support and sponsor. Others are far more active. They participate in the groups. They help organize events. They show up and speak at their rallies. So there is definitely also, just beyond the far right echo chamber on Facebook, there is also those real world implications as well.
Right. I think it's important for people to understand too that the detail this report goes into looking at their connections, because I don't want people saying like, oh, Facebook, these they're liking, they're just liking whatever. No, these people are actively participating in a lot of these groups and discussing with other people who are in these groups, specifically the rhetoric that the group's purpose is to spread.
Yeah, it also turns out they're networking with other legislators, sharing ideas and getting, and providing legislative maps, in a way that is different than the kind of ways in which we think about kind of far right legislation spreading. So when we looked at the networks of legislators that have developed in this group, we found that it was different than other networks like ALEC, the American Legislative Exchange Council, which has been for years responsible for tons of far right legislation popping up in local state legislatures. This is different. In fact, we found only around a 30% overlap between the membership that we document in this report and the membership of ALEC. So, we think we're seeing something new here that we ought to be paying a little bit more attention to than we have in the past.
Right. Now, what are we looking at in terms of like who were I know you profiled. Let's go into some of the people you profiled, because obviously, you explained why you decided to profile them. Who is, in your estimation, the most integral, I guess, person to bring up first? I mean, I guess we brought up Wendy Rogers, and her influence seems to be well beyond that of just a state legislator. She clearly is also sort of an online right-wing influencer. I think that's a good way to describe her.
Yeah, she is also one of those bridge figures that has her hands in lots of different pots on the far right and helps kind of network between those different sectors of the movement.
How
interesting.
Many... Go ahead. No, I don't want to. I want to hear this, and then I'll ask you after. Go ahead.
I was going to say, interestingly enough, in the current blow up that's happening in the Groyper world, it's come out that the connection made between the Groypers and Wendy Rogers camp was made by Jaden McNeil, one of the folks who is now in quite a vocal spitting match with Nick Fuentes and some of the other Groypers. So, the more that they fight, the more tidbits of information that they leak out to those of us who are paying a little bit closer attention.
Right. Now, what was I going to say? Oh my, I had it in my head, and then I was listening to you and I forgot. No, okay, here we go. How many of those 875? How many of those people are? What's the term you called for it again? Bridge connectors or something like that? What was the term you used?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how many are bridge connectors. If you look in the second chapter of the report, we actually have a networking diagram that shows the various legislators and that connects the various groups to which they belong. I think it's kind of a helpful visualization of, the role in which these groups play in helping connect some of these different legislators, beyond the state borders. So they're not just, meeting up in the cloakrooms in the state legislatures, but they're connecting to other folks.
This is a hardcore image here. I saw this before, and you describing it just now. You could literally, folks, go check out this report. You can literally click on this spider web of, it looks like a galaxy, honestly. And you can and you can click on portions of it and see who's connected to what, like the legislator, their connection to a certain group, and where those connections then connect to further down the line. It's pretty incredible. Jeez. Um, I think this is one of the things I mentioned earlier, where you really just have to go to the link and read the report and play around with this data, because we can't discuss 875 people and their various different interlocking connections in the time we have here. So, what are some of, like, when we talk about far right groups, and what are some of the things that these people, these legislators, these state legislators are advocating for? What do we get out of, like, a Wendy Rogers? What makes someone like Wendy Rogers, like, obviously there, I've seen her out there, and I think everyone's seen her out there, spreading the big lie that Donald Trump really won the 2020 election, which is not true. These things I think people are familiar with, but I think it also goes even further than most people are aware of when it comes to, like, the type of beliefs these 875 legislators have. Obviously varying for each one, but why don't you break down just some of the things we're talking about here?
Sure. Yeah. I think one of the things we really wanted to do with the report is not only just get a sense of who these legislators are and the types of groups they belong to, but also then see if there was any kind of legislative impact. So we looked at the voting records for all 875 legislators in this on a matrix that includes a variety of different anti-human rights and anti-democracy legislation. Everything from anti-abortion, anti-immigrant, anti-CRT, anti-protest legislation, COVID denial legislation, voter suppression legislation, and others. And then we looked at, the amount that the individuals in this report sponsored that kind of legislation. What we found is that these 875 legislators were responsible for sponsoring nearly 1,000 pieces of anti-human rights, anti-democracy legislation. Everything from the kind of don't say gay bills to the efforts to kind of ban Black history under the guise of anti-CRT, to laws that make it harder to vote, to laws that make it impossible for women to exercise their reproductive freedom, to other anti-trans bills, to laws that make it more difficult to protest, a whole range of things. And we document that all in the report. So I would encourage folks to take a look to see where these legislators are having that kind of impact, and the amount of legislation they actually helped pass this year is kind of shocking too. So yeah, please do take a look at that. It was, an incredible amount of work by our team to kind of pull all that together from these various streams to figure out across the board where these folks are having an impact.
Right. Now, what could we run down a few other of these legislators? Like, after Wendy Rogers, who's someone who you think is important to specifically focus on here?
Yeah, there are several that I think we highlighted in the report that are really useful to look at.
Yeah, let's talk about a few of them.
What's that?
Let's talk about a few of them specifically. Yeah, let's definitely.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So there's like Susan DeLemus. She's a New Hampshire House member, and she's one of 6 New Hampshire legislators who belong to sovereign citizen style groups. These are groups who believe that there are 2 different kinds of citizens, state citizens and 14th Amendment citizens. They're the groups that engage in the kind of paper terrorism. They're the groups who believe with the yellow fringe around the flag and admiralty law and all that kind of stuff. So you have 6 members of the New Hampshire delegation who are members of one or more of these sovereign citizen groups. DeLemus is a prime example of that. Not only does she belong to a bunch of these other groups, her husband was actually arrested for his involvement in the first Bundy standoff in Nevada.
Jeez. Wow.
So yeah, so that's one example of someone who is deeply involved in the kind of far right paramilitary wing of this movement, yet is sitting in the New Hampshire legislature.
Right.
I think another example of that, that kind of shows the over time radicalization of these groups is somebody like Tammy Nichols. Tammy Nichols is an Idaho state representative who provides that really interesting case study of how someone can move from starting, in the 2000 teens in the Tea Party movement, who moved into the militias and into the insurrectionary bent of groups like Ammon Bundy's People's Rights Network, and is now gauging in the kind of critical race theory attacks and the embrace of the kind of school-centered far-right activism, trying to do the anti-CRT, anti-trans stuff.
And so we got who else is on the list here? I'm looking through. I'm actually sort of.
There's somebody like Jim Walsh is the perfect one because
I'm enamored right now.
So many groups.
Let's get to Jim Walsh now. But I just wanted to say
Okay.
I'm sort of distracted right now by I'm looking at like the percentage of legislature data you have on the state. Like you go state by state. And you give like I'm like we'll get a little bit deeper into that in a second. Let's talk about this Rep Walsh guy.
Yeah, Jim Walsh made the report because we called him the ultimate joiner. Right, we found him in 24 different far-right Facebook groups.
Is that the most of all these?
That's the most. Yeah, that was surprising to us to see somebody who spends that much time on Facebook and has joined that many groups. And it's a wide range of groups. We're talking about everything from Tea Party groups to anti-Indian groups to 3%er groups to Ammon Bundy's People's Rights Network and a bunch of COVID denial groups, right? So he has, successfully used that platform to kind of, in Washington State, network a lot of those different groups and become a real important figure inside that wing of the movement.
Right. And when you were looking at these when you were looking at these legislators and you were finding them like how many were you expecting, if there was any sort of amount? Like was there a point where you were like, wow, this is a little bit like even like more than we thought it would be? Like was there a point where you were expecting it to be like this? Like when you were looking through some of these legislators, like when you saw Jim Walsh's 24 different far right groups that he was interacting in, was this like a thing that was expected in this report, or was it something where it's like, even we didn't realize it was this bad, and we cover this stuff?
Well, for Walsh, we knew he was a player, right? We've seen him around at a plethora of different far-right events over the years. So we knew he was a player. We didn't know how wide his connections were. We had no idea that he was as involved as he was. For a lot of others, we had no idea, right? When we started doing this report shortly after January 6th, our initial survey found, I think, 300 or 400. And we were shocked by that. And then as we kept digging, we kept finding more and more. We also kept finding more and more Facebook groups, which was also kind of shocking to us, especially after, Facebook continues to say, oh, well, we've done everything we can to take these groups down. We've responded after, the next insurrection or the next effort to attack whatever target. But we keep finding them. They keep popping up and morphing and changing in a variety of different ways. And speaking of January 6th, one of the other areas that we found quite stunning are the number of legislators that we found in the so-called Stop the Steal groups. Those efforts that were organized just before the insurrection to kind of stir up the idea that the election was stolen. And in fact, nobody represents that better than Texas Representative Phil Stephenson, who's who we found, I think, in about 17 different Stop the Steal groups before they got taken down from Facebook. So he was really providing, again, some vital efforts in networking these various groups around the country and helping introduce their efforts and encouraging them to continue to promote the big lie that the election had been stolen.
How did you go? Because this is interesting. Now that you mention it, how were you able to track this? Because I know, we're talking about Stop the Steal groups, and you correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I know Facebook said that they removed as many as they could early on, like in November 2020 when this was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's been ones that have slipped through the cracks and been recreated, and Facebook didn't take down right away. But it seems like, at least with something like that, Stop the Steal group, or I know white supremacist content is also banned on Facebook specifically, and that was a big thing. I remember when it happened, because they were allowing, they were delineating a difference between white supremacist and white nationalist in trying to let some of the content stay, but they decided to then reverse on that, I believe.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. Were these recent groups they were in, or have you guys been tracking these the legislators who joined these groups for that long now?
Well, we've been tracking the groups for that long. I think one of the challenges that we faced after the Cambridge Analytica scandal was it used to be that you could look at someone's page and see the groups that they belong to see what they liked, etc. That changed after Cambridge Analytica. So to do this project, we, in essence, had to reverse the process. So what we started with was by collecting the membership rolls of the various groups that we were tracking, and then we compared those to the individual, the campaign, and the official Facebook profile URLs of the various legislators. In fact, we did that. We did a search to compare those two databases for all 7,338 legislators in the country.
Jeez, that's some wow. So what you're saying, that's interesting. So what you're saying is you were actually tracking the groups themselves, and then as these legislators joined, you were able to see, oh wow, this is something that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. So when we decided to do this, we knew we had this trove of data, for, as you mentioned, a lot of the militia groups, a lot of the Stop the Steal groups had been actually, by the time we started working on this, taken down. But we had in our databases the collection of those members. So we were able to then do a pretty simple query to see which of these legislators had joined any of these groups. And so that's how, in the course of doing, some pretty easy data science, we're able to find the list of 875.
Right. So who is another individual we should touch on? Because I feel like we only hit 3. Maybe we should do 2 more. I know you said there was 10 that you break down, but I really want people to understand just how, we talked about someone in Arizona. Walsh was from. We talked about the person from New Hampshire. Where was Walsh from again?
Right here in Washington State.
Right, Washington State. So we're not talking about even like your traditional red states here. We're talking about this is across the country. Every state you found, right?
Yeah, absolutely. All 50 states. Yep.
Let me actually mention this data, because this is what I was looking at and it sort of distracted me before, because I just couldn't. I was just like, oh my god. Where did it go? Here we go. The legislators in far right groups. It seems like the most is in New Hampshire. 62 legislators, followed by Pennsylvania with 40. And Minnesota with 39. I mean, yeah, I think when people think about where these individuals are, they're usually probably not thinking New Hampshire, maybe PA, and Minnesota. That's very interesting. In terms of percentage of the legislator, though, 35% of Alaska's legislators are in far-right groups. They were the number one in terms of percentage of the legislature, followed by Arkansas, where more than a quarter of their state legislators were in had connections to far right groups, and Idaho in third with about a little less than 23% of the legislature. So I mean, I guess some states that the original, those first 3 states we mentioned, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, a lot more, but also I guess they make up a smaller percentage of the legislature because those are bigger states with more representatives. But still, I mean, geez, both the top legislator for raw numbers and the percentage ones are jarring, to be honest.
Absolutely. Yeah, we were, like I said, I've been doing this for almost 30 years now, and very little shocks me. But when we saw that final number of 875, I was stunned. I made sure we double and triple and quadruple checked it, because it was gobsmacking to see that there were so many legislators who had, dipped their toes into this world and had, been fed this kind of unadulterated wash of misinformation. And it runs the gamut. I think another legislator that would be good to talk about is somebody like Rick Bratton, a Missouri state legislator who's in the report because of his efforts to promote anti-LGBTQIA stuff, right? He has
Right.
been really involved in that. And, on the floor of the Missouri legislature, he said, and I quote, "When you look at the tenets of religion, of the Bible, of the Quran, of other religions, there is a distinction between homosexuality and just being a human being."
Right.
So that kind of
Jeez.
dehumanizing rhetoric on the floor of a state legislature is still happening in 2022. And so I think it is a glaring reminder that while we have made tremendous inroads on a lot of things, that there are those folks who are more than willing to take us back, pretty dramatic steps on a whole lot of different fronts. So, as our founder, Lenny Teskin, says, we've got to be able to walk and chew bubblegum at the same time and pay attention to these variety of different places where the fights are going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it was interesting that was I'm glad you brought up that it was Braden, right? Yeah. I'm glad you brought up Braden, because the other people we were talking about, obviously horrible, but it seems like Braden is the one. I'm sure he's not the only one, but seemed to be the most prominent and the ones you profiled to have this like openly anti-LGBT Q rhetoric. I mean, I'm sure the entirety of them do, but he seems to be particularly focused on that. And that seems to be the right's. That seems. I can't even delineate. I can't even like give it that like. I can't even say that word. That like that it's 100%. The right is focusing recently on this space being anti-LGBTQ all over again. Like it's like, geez, like we're in like the early 2000s again or something like that. It's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm back to 1992 when the Oregon Citizens Alliance was running around doing anti-gay stuff in Oregon. That's how far we've stepped back. It's pretty remarkable to see that kind of stuff happening again. And I have concerns, of course, that with this current Supreme Court, it is only going to embolden that kind of stuff. And I anticipate we're going to see a lot more emphasis on this side of the ledger.
Now, did you happen to look? Maybe it's in the report. I might have just looked over it. But did you connect? I mean, it wouldn't be surprising if all of them, but it's still an interesting data point to see. Did you look into which of these state legislators, if any, were received endorsements from particular institutional GOP groups, or even maybe former President Donald Trump himself?
We haven't done that. That's a really interesting question. We've talked about doing that, as well as looking at the money trail to figure out where if there was any overlap in terms of the variety of different sources. But we wanted to get this out in a timely fashion. So I think those are things we'll do for a later date. But it definitely begs the question as to, what kind of overlap there is with with Trump endorsements and with the Republican establishment, and of course with the various financial donor sources for these candidates.
Right. I mean, I'll please, when you do that, please come back on the show, because I mean, the title report is perfect. Breaching the mainstream, because I mean, nothing would talk about breaching the mainstream more than institutional, old school, legacy Republican groups and organizations outright coming out and saying, "This is our guy." I mean, again, this is not surprising stuff, but
No.
it would still be interesting to see exactly how many and which ones they've thrown their weight behind officially, openly. Because there's still some guys they try to distance from, at least until they they decide backing this person openly is actually for our benefit. Oh, here's someone.
Yeah,
Oh,
you
go
know, in
ahead.
fact,
Yeah.
there are a few people who are in the report who have since been expelled from their various legislative positions. Folks like Mike Neerman out in Oregon, and a few others. So it does happen on occasion, but it is a rare incidence. People who are highlighted in the report, or mentioned at least, are more likely to die than they are to be expelled from their caucuses.
Now, this is someone who I saw in the report, and I knew before reading the report because another one of those influencers like Wendy Rogers, Anthony Sabatini. Can you tell us a little bit about him? Because
Oh yeah.
I've seen his name around. Like, some of these people I might have recall, like Susan Delimis, who you spoke about, and Tammy Nichols. I'm pretty sure I've seen, and Tammy Nichols especially, because she was an old school Tea Party person, right?
Yeah.
So these are names that I've seen before. But in terms of like having some sort of influence online and constantly shared, Wendy Rogers is one, and then this Anthony Sabatini I've seen around on the social media platforms.
Yeah, he is quite fond of showing up on social media platforms with his gun. He likes to be involved in, just about all the different far right mobilizations. Everything from kind of stop the steal efforts to the COVID denial stuff. In fact, in the report, we documented him as being involved in 5 different COVID denial groups, 6 different stop the steal groups, and he even joined a group that is influenced by the Posse Comitatus. So he's being fed with the furthest of far right ideas. And is one of those figures that has a pretty active online presence. Somebody also like that is somebody like Aaron Bernstein from Pennsylvania, who in the report we call Mr. COVID Denial, because he's joined so many different COVID denial groups and is a constant purveyor of the latest and greatest COVID conspiracy. Even to this day, he's out there promoting a range of COVID conspiracies. And has been influential at helping use that platform to radicalize around other things like CRT and anti-trans stuff, and move that mobilization into a more hard right direction. I think one of the things that we really took away from this report is, for us, it reminded us the importance of really paying attention to the movements on the ground and their interaction with legislators. So rather than looking at the kind of billionaires or the funding sources, it was also important to see where the connections were happening on the ground, and where that kind of synergy was happening between these legislators and the grassroots. And so by reversing the process and starting with the groups, it gave us a kind of bottom up look at what was happening, which I think illuminated a lot of things we wouldn't have otherwise seen.
Right. That's interesting. Right. So I'm looking now at the legislative impact section, and I'm surprised. Geez, this is what I mean. We're 45 minutes in, and we haven't got to the the actual impact on those state laws. So again, I want to tell people to please check out this report. It's honestly really one of the more, and I'm not even just talking about like the actual, obviously the data is incredible and what you guys were able to pull, but it's very well put together.
Thank
It's
you.
not, it's
Thank
not
you.
just, a boring, and I don't, for me, it's not, but I'm talking about for, the average reader. They hear a report and they probably think, a scientific, journal type article where it's just, pages of text. No, this is put together in a way where there's a lot of images and graphics to help you better understand the just how the impact of the situation is, and that spider web of connections is incredible too. So let's talk about the legislative impact here. What are we talking about in terms of how powerful these far right state legislators have been able to be in their, in the states where they were elected?
Yeah, I think this was really the most eye-opening thing for us to find that they'd been so successful at sponsoring, just a range of legislation, from anti-abortion to anti-CRT to anti-immigrant to anti-LGBTQIA to anti-protest, COVID denial, and voter suppression. We found that these legislators were responsible for nearly 1,000 pieces of legislation being co-sponsored. And as a result of that, they passed a shockingly high number of them as well. Not an overall big percentage, but given the fact that some of these bills were some of the harshest and most extreme we've seen in years, to see them having any kind of success was pretty shocking. And again, their success, while these individuals were spread all around the country, they had the most success at co-sponsoring those bills regionally in the South, where they introduced, a ton, particularly voter suppression bills, where in the South they introduced and co-sponsored 100 different voter suppression bills. In the South, they co-sponsored 98 different COVID denial bills, 52 different anti-protest laws, 44 different anti-LGBTQ bills, 8 anti-immigrant ones, 56 anti-CRT bills, and 69 anti-abortion pieces of anti-abortion legislation. Now, not all those got passed. I would encourage you to take a look in terms of the success rates, to look, specifically at your area in the report. I mean, we could spend all days just rattling through the numbers, but we document at the end, the exact bills that got passed and the kind of impact that they have. And for this, we were, so fortunate to have other groups who tracked the legislative side much more closely than we do. So, for the anti-abortion stuff, we looked at, the amazing work that the Guttmacher Institute is doing. For the anti-voting rights stuff, we looked at the stuff that the Brennan Center for Justice is doing in terms of tracking the stuff. The anti-protest stuff, there's an amazing nonprofit that tracks anti-protest legislation. For COVID denial, we had to look at a couple of different lists, including the National Association of State Legislators. But to then see in action the kind of impact that they were having in terms of this bill sponsorship, because I know so often in progressive politics, we think about, oh, these bills are just messaging bills, or, oh, they won't get passed, it doesn't mean anything. But they are clearly signifiers to the ideological base, that their ideas are supported by these legislators, and that they are being not only supported rhetorically, but they're also being introduced as pieces of legislation. And, they're being debated in committees and on House floors, and in some cases even getting passed.
Do we know in terms of how many have been passed? I'm sorry if you said, but I know you mentioned how many were were up for vote, right?
Let me get you that. Hold on.
Sure,
that's
don't
that's
worry
a number
about it.
that always escapes me.
This is a
because
lot of.
it's-
I want people to understand. This is a lot of data here. I don't think really.
Yeah.
You have to check out the report. We're talking about how many different sections are there here? We got 8. We got chapters. That's how you.
Yeah,
I forgot. That's how you.
in total, it's about 40,000 words.
It's a
And
incredible
yeah.
report.
And
I honestly
because it's
can't
so
get
big,
over-
we've gotten a lot of
so-
feedback by that, and so we're going to do also a print version of it, so people can sit down and read it, because it's a lot, and we want people to have access to this and use it as a resource to see what's going on in their communities, and if nothing else, provide kind of a benchmark for this is what things are like on the ground in 2022. This is what we're up against, and so I'm hoping that it'll have that kind of impact. But I actually do have the number now. It had escaped me. In total, these 875 legislators had been responsible for 963 different bills. Of those, 100 became law. So they were able to pass 100 different bills. across that stream of anti-democracy, anti-human rights legislation that we mentioned. I think the largest concentration of those that passed were the anti-abortion ones, followed close behind by the COVID denial, anti-protest, and some of the other bills. But yeah, so it runs the gamut in terms of being able to dramatically alter what state government looks like, because there are these new networks and these new ideological formations forming, often right in front of our eyes. So yeah, so in a lot of ways, doing this 30,000-foot look at what's going on was, I think, really helpful for us organizationally to get a sense of how far this stuff had moved into the mainstream. And we're hoping it'll inspire other folks to start digging into some of this research and finding out more of these connections, where this stuff is having an impact, and, and maybe people start to take action on it as well.
Right. I mean, that's what this report, that's what I meant at the beginning of this episode, where, all the horrible things happening. This report is an eye-opening one that obviously lays out the horrible things, but should inspire you, or at least, light a fire in you, at least to vote. I mean, in your state races. I mean, please pay attention to what's going on. I mean, we're seeing how they're using the state to basically get around what they can't do at a federal level. I mean, look at what's happening in Florida and Texas. Look what's happening in, and I can name issues too. We got what's going on with the LGBTQ community in those states, specifically when it comes to trans rights. We even talk about education and what they're doing to LGBT students and teachers. We have abortion rights now up, probably going to be, sadly, up for grabs in each state, and states like Texas, Florida, and a number of other of these red states will be able to outright ban it. Obviously, at a federal level is what we prefer these laws to cover, so we don't have to worry on each state as an individual when it comes to basic human rights. But at the same time, if this is the cards we're currently dealt, unfortunately, we have to play that states' rights game and work to vote against far-right candidates and vote in better candidates. And I don't care who those candidates are, as long as they are better than the far-right ones. And in a state like New York or whatever, how many, by the way, do we got in New York? Far-right legislators. 'Cause I want to show people how blue, liberal, East Coast elite New York's got plenty of them as well,
That's a great question. Let me look for you.
Right here in my home state.
New York is actually smaller. It only has 8.
And I'm sure they're all upstate too, for the most part.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Right. Yeah, but
if you look, one of the cool things that's also in the report of the maps. I'm
Right.
really kind of fond of the maps. It was a challenge to do things to map out state legislatures, because they're way different than federal legislature districts, and it's not easy to figure out how to map all those. So yeah, I'm nerding out on the maps in the report, but yeah, please do check them out. They're kind of fun.
It's even the 8 though in New York State. I mean, there you go. Who has the least? Would it be? I'm gonna throw like I don't know, Vermont out there, just because they probably have the least in the overall aggregate of legislators in general.
There are 3 tied for least: Delaware, Hawaii, and Vermont.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I scored a
You are
point.
correct.
Right.
In fact, you get the double bonus, because Vermont, as a percentage of the legislature, it is the smallest at 0.56. So yes, you would win the award.
But
for
that's
guessing on that.
That's even more sort of impressive, being that I'm assuming Vermont's legislative bodies are very small to begin with. So you would even assume that 3 would take up a larger percentage of if it was 3 in another state.
Just one. Each of those has 1. So yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I mean,
Oh,
apparently they must
right.
have.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. You said there were 3 states that each had one. Got it.
Yes,
Okay, I
that's right. Yeah.
misunderstood. I thought it was
No,
three
no,
states
no,
that each had
no
three.
worries.
Right.
Yeah, no, Delaware, Hawaii, and Vermont all just have one legislator.
All right. So
Um,
be more like Delaware, Vermont. I can't believe I'd ever tell anyone to be more like Delaware, but be more like Delaware, Vermont, and Hawaii. We should all be more like Hawaii, to be quite honest. I can use a trip to Hawaii, by the way. I'm not
yeah,
even
no
a beach
doubt.
person. I just want to go far away for a little bit, just disappear for a while, you know.
Oh, that
Uh,
would be nice. That would be so nice.
I wouldn't even go on the beach. I would just stay in a hotel room, just away from anybody, everybody, everything going on in the mainland. Hell, I'll even go to Alaska just to let you know how far away I need to get for a little bit. And Alaska had a high percentage too.
The highest,
Right.
yes. Yeah.
Right. So, in terms of the report's conclusion, what is it, by the way? What are we concluding here in terms of it's bad, obviously, but I don't think that's all you said. That's my takeaway. But again, I'm an optimist. I think this is the report people need to see to. Hell, get involved yourself, please. If you're someone, we're talking state politics here. We're talking like at district levels. We're talking about if you got a car, you could probably hit up every home in some of these districts in a matter of like a few months. Like these are small state legislative districts we're talking about in a lot of sense. I'm sure there are states where it's much bigger because of the population and everything. But anyway, for the most
Yeah,
part,
some of these folks have won with as little as a few thousand votes.
right. You
So,
can make a difference here, and I'm telling you, it means a lot when people meet with someone, especially for these statewide races. I know of older people who, again, they were probably going to vote Democrat anyway, but in terms of a primary, I know a few older people who got visited by one of the people in that primary, and just from that visit and physically meeting that person and talking with them and connecting on that human level, that's the person they decided to vote for. So this is where you can do that, and this is where you can actually make that difference and fight off any of these far right legislators who are making this country worse when it comes to horrible legislation that strips some of our most vulnerable of their basic rights.
yeah, I think one of the things we learned in the course of doing this report was just how bad it had gotten. In terms of the legislative impact and the breadth of this stuff, that I think alone is stunning and should be cause for concern. Anecdotally, I can tell you we've started to look at the batch of candidates who are out there right now, and there's a whole group of folks who are trying to get elected this time around who make these folks look moderate. And so I think that, of course, is going to be an even bigger challenge because this stuff is not going away anytime soon. January 6th was more the coming out party for for the far right's efforts to move into the mainstream rather than was the end of any kind of movement. And I think that it's also important to remember to pay attention to the legislators we've cited in this report, because quite often state legislators serve as the farm teams for those who run for a higher office. So today's, New Hampshire state legislator could be tomorrow's U.S. senator, or they could be running for for any other, or governor, or any other kind of office. So we both have to keep in mind this stuff in the short term and the kind of impact that they're having legislatively, get involved, in those kind of legislative fights, and take on those issues and speak out for them. Then also engage politically to defend democracy and human rights. And then even more importantly is, pay attention to this stuff for the long term, because, you don't want to wake up tomorrow and find that, oh, well, I just thought that this person was a joke. And, 6 years later, find out that they're now the governor of your state and is, the chief executive, making sure that anti-trans or anti-LGBTQIA or anti-abortion or any of these other kinds of pieces of legislation are getting passed. The kind of composition of the Republican Party today is changed dramatically from even what we thought about it a couple of years ago in the kind of MAGA version. That Make America Great Again version is in the past. And this is no longer just about Donald Trump. It's no longer just about the kind of message that he's putting forward, but in fact is taking on a life of its own now. And that there are lots of future candidates who are now taking up the mantle and, burrowing in at the state legislature and thinking about long term how they're going to take over the levers of power at higher offices.
Right. Devin Burghart, my God. Once again, a great episode. I feel like every time you come on, you got something absolutely amazing. And we didn't even get to you mentioned it, a little tease, but we didn't even get to the Groyper, drama, infighting. I mean, I think
much drama.
I think drama.
So much drama.
I think drama is a good description of it, but I also don't want to downplay it as just like, your basic like internet YouTuber drama or something. I think it's important to see what's coming out of this in terms of details about Nick Fuentes and his organization and what he runs. That is eye-opening, I think, in many ways about how some of these guys run. And Fuentes is the perfect example of one of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's you'll have to have me on again to talk about that, because it is not only just that kind of, interesting internet drama where, his former allies are now calling Nick Fuentes the semen inspector, but it is, but it is a sign that Fuentes and his wing of white nationalism are trying to more fully embrace the kind of incel side of the equation, and trying to use that to build their platform upon, as opposed to those who are trying to be more of the more explicit mainstreamers like McNeil and some of the other characters.
Right. Devin, again, like you said, you have to come on and again to
Anytime.
talk about that. Yep, let's schedule something in a few weeks, just so
Cool.
we don't get this too far out. And
Right
on. Have Devin Burghart, Executive Director of the Institute for Research and Education on Human Rights. Everyone, check out the report. It's in the description on YouTube and in the description on the Patreon public post. And oh my God, the Patreon public post didn't go out. What the hell? I'm publishing it right now. How did that not go out? My bad. It's up now, folks. Please go check it out. Damn, that sucked. I guess people didn't get the heads up in their email if they're subscribed to the Patreon. Jeez, I gotta see what happened there. Well, anyway, Devin, where can people find you on online? Drop the the website URL, your Twitter handle, anything that you want to drop. Please, by all means, go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, you can find me. Our website is irehr.org. You can find me on Twitter at dburghart. That's DBURGHART, or follow us at IREHR, also on Twitter.
Thank you so much, Devin. Have a great night.
Thanks, Matt. Always a pleasure.
Yep. Take care.
Take it easy.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to go to the second half of the show. Bloop, bloop. And talk about, I'll take calls. There was hours before we went live here, there was another shooting. This one in Texas. An elementary school is a school shooting. Last I saw, 21 people dead. I don't even know the breakdown, the most recent breakdown of those numbers, to be honest. I'm seeing 18 kids. I'm seeing 19 kids. Before that, there was something like 14 kids. It's just, it's just enough, too much. I really am at a loss for words. What more can you say at this point, honestly? So let's go to the second half of the show. You can talk about whatever you want. You can call in. I'll open up the Skype. Doomed Live is the Skype username. Call in. You can also. I'll just really quickly drop some things that you can do to support the show. Don't want to spend too much time on that right now. Patreon.com/Matt Binder. If you would like to financially support this show. Also, you can. I'm just thinking right now. Support the show at youtube.com/Matt Binder if you don't already watch the live stream there. And if you would subscribe to the channel, that would be great if you're not already subscribed. Twitch.tv/Matt Binder is also another place you can catch the live stream. If you can't afford to or don't want another subscription, a paid subscription via the Patreon page, consider connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. And excuse me. And you get a free Twitch Prime subscription, a free paid subscription. That's right. Costs you nothing. It comes free with your Amazon Prime. With your Amazon Prime account. And you just got to connect your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account. And Twitch gives you that free Prime subscription. And you can give that to any Twitch streamer you'd like. You don't have to give it to me. I'm telling you about it so you do give it to me. And if you would like to give it to me as your streamer, that'd be great. If not, don't worry about it. Give it to another leftist streamer. Give it to another progressive streamer. Give it to another streamer you enjoy. Give it to whoever you would like. Just don't let it go to waste, basically. Don't let Amazon just walk away with that extra little amount they give. Give it to a streamer. It literally comes free with your Amazon Prime subscription. Don't let it go to waste. Follow me on Twitter at Matt Binder, doomedcast.com for the podcast version of the show. Check out Scam Economy, scameconomy.com for the podcast version of that show. I will be doing a live Scam Economy as part of the Digital Void Brooklyn Fest this Thursday. Details you can find on my Twitter page or go to... let me get the actual website, digitalvoid.media. Digitalvoid.media. Tickets are very cheap. I believe they're like $10 or something like that, maybe 15. Let me double check for you. It'll be a good time. I'm not the only person. It's a whole fest with it's a great lineup. $15 tickets. And the lineup is Bridget Todd from There Are No Girls on the Internet. Myself. Dylan Adler. Joy Ray, Callahan Rosenblatt, Stephen Castillo, Jake Flores, Emily Burke, Ryan Broderick, who's been a guest on Scam Economy, and Dr. Jamie Cohen. Please check it out. And if you're in Brooklyn, come by, say hello. And if you aren't in Brooklyn or can't come out, that will be this week's episode of Scam Economy. So it will be going up, a little bit later than usual. Usually the show goes up Thursday night, and I do the live stream right here Thursday night. But being that I'll be doing a live in-person show in Brooklyn Thursday night, obviously the show won't be going up simultaneously as a podcast and on my stream. They're streaming it themselves, the Digital Void Media Fest. So I'll get you the link to that. If there is going to be a live link, like a public link for that. They might, I'm not sure if you need a ticket for that too, but I'll let you know. But either way, my portion, the Scam Economy portion, is 100% mine and will be the free podcast version. And you will all be able to listen to it if you can't come out to Brooklyn. So folks, see you in the second half of the show if you're a live stream viewer or a patron viewer. For everybody else, who isn't sticking around or just listens to the audio version only, the audio only version of the show, I will see you all next time on Doomed. Give me 1 second. I'll be back in just 1 second. I need to get a drink. I ran out of my drink and I need one. Otherwise, I will not be able to continue. Just give me 1 more minute here. All right, we are back. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second half of the show, the patron half of the show, and let's do this up. We are. Oh, someone just tried to call in, as I was on a break here. Um, let's pick up this call. Oh, all right. Well, call back in. Looks like I missed it. They hung up again, or this was a second person. Oh, here we go. Let's take this call right now. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Oh my
Hey, what's
God.
up, Matt? Can you
Oh
see
my
me?
God. Oh my
This is
God.
for review.
Can I pull you up on the stream?
Sorry?
Can I pull you up on the stream?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Do you want me to pull you up on the stream? I'm assuming that's why you're using your video, right?
Oh, yeah, yes, you can. You can.
Ladies and gentlemen, for God, it has to be years now. It feels like years at least. For years, the Majority Report audience, as well as the Doomed audience, have been blessed with the presence of our regular caller, Dave from Jamaica. And the only small snippet I've ever seen of his physical appearance is what I always assumed was his real photo on Twitter, his avatar. Is that you in the Twitter avatar?
Yes, that is me.
Okay, but it's very, it's just a small still. But ladies and gentlemen, I proudly present to you a Doomed with Matt Binder exclusive. Dave from Jamaica. Oh my God. This is awesome.
Yeah. So I'm kind of using my phone because I figured the camera is good enough. So it's me. So I found your guest very enlightening, if not terrifying. I don't know. Before I was kind of saying maybe they should split up Facebook and stuff, but no, I'm all for straight banning it. I'm just for straight banning Facebook. It's too useful a tool for various right-wing groups of all flavors to just interconnect. And granted, the damage has kind of been done already, but if we can prevent some of it from kind of new forms of it from popping up, that would be good. But what would your solution to this Facebook quandary be? Because I think a lot of this stuff that ties these various groups together is Facebook.
Right. I mean, it's an interesting situation. I mean, I think they can always do more, obviously. And I think, unfortunately, let's put it this way, though. A lot of these social networks, obviously still not perfect and still could do a lot more. But I feel like we are at a point where, like, they are doing a decent job in terms of basically their policies and acting on them for the most part. Obviously, there's a lot of horrible stuff that gets through. But I mean, look at how quickly Twitch clamped down on, and I'm not saying hand it to Twitch. I mean, but the fact is that shooter streamed his thing on a channel that had zero shit about it. Like, there was just a brand new channel this shooter started, and from the Buffalo shooter. I can't believe I have to, be specific, because we just had another major shooting. But that Buffalo shooter who streamed his horrible act on Twitch, it was shut down pretty quickly. I think like at the 10-minute mark. Again, this was someone with no prior history, so they didn't know who was setting this up and stuff like that. And when we're dealing with live streams, it's not like they have a library of video that they could, or photos that they can match it to know we can't show this, because it's brand new footage, never before seen anywhere, because it's being shot in real time. You know what I mean? But they took it down really fast, and they were able to keep it off. I haven't seen any feeds being. I mean, I know there's video out there, but it's not on Twitch. So again, I'm not saying they did a great. I'm not saying like you got to hand it to them, but they did what these platforms should be doing. Should be doing. Yes. Yes. But here's the thing: we're at the point where this is the level we should have been at 8 years ago, and now it's too late. Like, whatever they do now will curb new. Maybe new acts or new movements or campaigns, but still they'll get through. But it'll help curb them. But the damage has already been done. I
guess for me, I guess the newer platforms like your Twitter and Twitch, still lots of it to desired. But as you said, they did what was required of them. Also, now that you brought up Twitch, those small numbers of views the shooters had, I think they should really investigate that, because how would they be there just randomly without some sort of prior knowledge? I'm highly suspicious of that. But that aside, the issue I have with Facebook in particular is the way it works, right? It links people with similar interests, or at least it links friends and families, and that's kind of its primary thing. And from that, I can see how if you're a far right person of any flavor, it will link you to other far right people incidentally through the various news feeds, because it's basically feeding back what you want to hear, right? And then that's connections are brought. I don't know how you regulate that. I don't know how you break that up, because you're going to end up with similar problems because just of the nature of the algorithm. I guess maybe I take the Sam Cedar position. Either get rid of it or make it to a point where it's not profitable and nobody wants to invest in it, because I think it's the in nature of how these that particular social media network works is the problem. It links, it's by its nature, no matter what you do, you're going to end up linking far right groups. And since they don't want to put the money in to police certain shit, I don't see any other option.
Right. I mean, it's a rough sort of, because I don't think that I don't think we are in a good spot right now, obviously, but I also think in terms of their reaction time and their policies, it's much better than where we were. The problem just is that we're, the damage has already been done in certain aspects, and it's difficult, because also I do think in the aggregate, these platforms have, I'm not saying the platforms have done good, but have facilitated a lot of good that other people basically use them to do. You know what I mean? So it is a difficult sort of position in terms of where I stand on this. I think these platforms are used for good, these platforms are used for bad. if they're doing everything they can and are constantly evolving to do something about the bad, then they, again, not to hand it to them, that's what they should be doing, and they should continue doing that. Problem is,
I
they
don't
were just
I
so
don't
late to the
doubt
ball
that
game.
do good, but
They,
I'm guessing, and this is just anecdotal from my own head. I think it does more bad than it does good if we just add it all up, right? I can
right,
hear the countless stories of people who had relatives who were kind of little not so mentally stable, and then when they surf Facebook for a long time, it just feeds into that, and they get far worse. I've not heard so many stories in the opposite direction, if you understand what I mean. And I'm focusing particularly on Facebook because that seems to be the one old folks seem to get most of their shit from.
right.
So, but as I said, I don't have a solution, but that's how I just think it's so much a net negative.
Right.
And before I jump off, I guess I want to speak a little bit about guns because I come from a country where lots of people might experience personal violence and then feel the need to get a gun. I think lots of people have to realize you're not going to beat these far right militias just by personal gun ownership. That's kind of a fantasy. Guns are great for like shooting people. They're not so great at blocking bullets coming towards you. The reason why the far right has an advantage is because they have systems behind them, military training, all of that crap, right? Just owning a shotgun in your yard is not, an individual owning a shotgun in the yard is not going to do something. What kind of is the power is, dare I say, the people themselves and how they're trained. So I understand why people are afraid because the world seems to be going towards a fascist turn right now. But personal gun ownership isn't going to save you. I have several friends who bought guns personally and are in the grave because when a moment when they weren't looking, whoever was going to get them got them, right? And I think people need to kind of get out of this fantasy land that right wingers have with gun ownership. It can protect you. You only can protect yourself against a threat you can see coming. So now I don't know what as leftists we should do in this, but I can tell you that's not the road. It's not the thing that the panacea people think it is. It's more of a security blanket, if anything. It kind of reminds me of people who get beat up in high school and decide to learn karate, and then when they get in a fight, they still got beat up. it's just not how the real world works. But that's my 2 cents on it. But Matt, thanks for talking and with me. And I want to shout out your supporters and your fans and your patrons because yesterday's calls were very educational. So you've cultivated a great group of listeners. I always learn from them, and
that's awesome. Thank you.
from them. So later, guys.
Dave, I just want to say to you too. I mean, I know you've heard it from me before, but I got to follow up what you just said. It is always super interesting talking to you. You always bring, if you don't have a very interesting opinion, which you usually do, you have a very important, interesting question. So please, it is great to finally talk with you in visual medium, not just audio.
Oh yes. The avatar picture you saw, that was one I took with Michael and Rachel back 2 years ago, so a couple of gray hairs less. So that if you're curious, that's where that snippet comes from for the Twitter pic.
Right.
But Matt, you seem ageless. I can't find a gray hair on your head. What's going on?
I mean, I actually do have a gray or two, and it's it really messes with the age I have going on everywhere else. I don't have the I don't have the smoothest skin, but I guess just my so I don't have a baby face that way, but I guess just my features look young in general. But then my gray
start dying hair. That's how I'm gonna avoid it.
People do ask me if I've dyed my hair once they find out my age. No, I mean I do have a few grays. If you see me in real life, you might be able to even pick them out. I probably would. I don't know if I would dye my hair if I went full on gray. It depends. It depends how gray.
It makes me look older. Like I'm only 39 and I feel like I'm 45.
If it was like the salt and pepper thing, I probably would keep it. If we're talking like Ric Flair, I'd probably dye it.
No.
I don't need the Ric Flair. Yeah, that's a bit much.
Yeah, maybe I need to style it different so the salt and pepper comes out.
Right. Some people find the salt and pepper thing to be very attractive. So, maybe you should maybe it's a thing that, I don't know. What's your relationship situation like?
Still single, but I'm chasing down something. But catch you later, Matt.
All right. Take care. Bye. Let's go back to just lost him again. Again, Critical Revolt says Binder with a long streak like Tulsi. I'm trying to pick up a call right now and it's like frozen. I gotta hang up on you. What's going on? It's like stuck in some sort of in-between. Hold on, I gotta sign out of Skype for a second. There's something going on with Skype. I should have known from the beginning there was something going wrong with Skype. All right, Skype is completely frozen. I gotta close Skype. I'm sorry, everyone. Give me a second. I wonder if it's an M1 issue with Skype. Because I didn't have. This has been a while though. It might be just a Skype issue overall. What's going on here? Let's see what's going on. Let's see. Hopefully this is fixed. I gotta re-sign in, which is not a good sign because usually Skype automatically signs me into what I was already signed into before. Let's see. This should work. All right. Something was definitely wrong because whoever called in before wasn't even logged. So just call right back in. And because I can't even message you back to see. Oh, here we go. This should work. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Hello? You were on the air. Oh.
I'm muted. I apologize.
That's all right.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Josh from California.
Hey, Josh from California. What's up? What would you like to talk about?
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up on what Dave said.
Sure,
this
go ahead.
Like obsession with right-wing militias and right-wing gun owners that think they're going to fight the army. I spent 4 years in the army. I spent 4 years in the Marines. If you're not an organized force, you're going to get the shit kicked out of you. So all of this like private gun ownership nonsense, it's the same. And one of the things that's kind of an issue about the way like a lot of the left talks about like Afghanistan and Iraq and, all the way back to Vietnam, like the U.S. lost. We did because we left because thankful, and we should have. Like, I don't believe in imperialism or any of that. Like, we never should have been there in the first place. It's the whole point. Militarily, we did not lose. We absolutely, like, pretty much every engagement, force on force. Yes, civilian casualty. You guys, you're not like the chat's commenting on like I'm not pro any of this. I'm just saying like the amount of force that the military can project. You're not going to win with your individual AR-15s. The level of training and the level of armor and the level of artillery and all of that stuff. It's just it's this weird like He-Man obsession with like I'm going to be the or Rambo obsession with I'm going to be that one guy that takes out 300 people or whatever. It's a fantasy. Like it's not something that is in any way in reality. And I just think we'd be a lot better off if people sort of understood the level of force that the military can bring to bear in any given situation, and just how horrible it is, and like how, and again, like you wouldn't want to see this here. I mean, God forbid, it's like, look at the scenes from Ukraine, where they're fighting in cities and stuff, and how horrible that is. And then imagine, that brought here. It's just that it's ridiculous. I mean, it's like the fantasy that, oh, I need to keep my gun because I need to fight the tyranny of the government. Like, if you get to that point, we're all kind of fucked.
Right. Yeah. What could you, we're it's one of those things where it's like, what do you do about it? I mean, when it gets to a certain point, it's just like, we are where we are right now. Obviously, more always can be done, but it can't go back in time, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. I mean, it's really frustrating. And then, so, I mean, I'm just sort of like trying to process. I hate guns so much. For like having been shot at, I don't know, dozens of times.
Jeez.
It's not fun. They're not, they're not toys. They're not, they're not something that you really want people to be arming themselves with. Like, I get the whole thing, but like, we're the only country that has these constant mass shootings, and we let these things just hover around every level of society at this point. And it's just, they're people can say that they're tools or whatever, but they're just machines of death. Like, that's all guns are, whether it's for hunting, whether it's for, you're still out there trying to kill something, and the point may be for food or whatever, but it's still something to kill something. It's not, there's no other purpose for a gun. And so I just, with what happened today, it just feels like we're soulless at this point as a country, because nothing's going to change. We're just, we're stuck, and it just feels like part of us, or half of us, not even half, because 40% of the country doesn't vote most of the time. So it's like, this tiny proportion of us are just keeping all of us in this hell, and it's really frustrating. And I don't know exactly what the point of the call is, but
the call. I don't even know if I answered or even addressed what you said in the first half correctly, even because I feel like we're talking about. There's so much that fits into all this. I've actually sort of I've evolved a little bit, and I don't want to say evolve because it makes it sound like I'm there's no better scenario. I'm just at the point where I think it's clear that nothing's going to be done about guns. And as horrible as it sounds, I feel like we need to start focusing on different areas, because we're just beating I don't want to say beating a dead horse either, because we're correct. Like, something needs to be done about guns. But if we are focusing on the guns, we're guaranteeing that nothing's going to be addressed, because we know nothing's going to be addressed when we focus on the guns. Do you know what I mean? Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. really hesitate to accept the alternatives that are offered, though, because people want to focus on mental health. The only time they want to focus on mental health. My dad was a psychologist for the state of Maryland for 30 some years, and he dealt with all the schizophrenic homeless people and all that kind of stuff. They would sort of treat them and in a sort of a medium term type treatment setting, and then they'd release them. And of course that was one of the first things that got cut, after Reagan cut all of the institutions and all that kind of stuff. So like by the time he left, he was like the last psychologist in that entire 700 office building, and that had been full of people, of psychologists and social workers and all that kind of stuff when he started in the 70s. And so people want to address mental health, but they only want to address mental health in this context, and then they'll get bored and say, well, why are we spending money on that? So yes, I agree that focusing on like gun control isn't going to go anywhere, but I really hesitate to leap at some of the other solutions, because people will find excuses to cut funding for it as soon as they can get away with it.
Right. I mean, I think those are definitely good points. But I'm sort of like, I don't even know if it's mental health. Honestly, I don't even know. I don't even know what it is anymore. Like, I don't even know what we address here. Like, what is going on? Like, that this is like, with the Buffalo shooter, I think it's pretty clear what we address. We don't know enough about this guy. Who did the one today? Or maybe it's come out since I've been doing the show, but I don't think he had a manifesto or a deranged screed where he's explain. Maybe he does and they've just released it, or maybe he does and they haven't. But
I haven't seen anything. He did supposedly kill his grandmother before.
Yeah,
and again, like that's early reporting, so who knows how accurate.
That's the same. If accurate, that's the same. Literally the same thing that the Sandy Hook shooter did. He killed his mother, and then took the violence to Newtown. I mean, I think there's a difference between, again, I don't know about this one yet. We don't know enough, but there is there's overlap obviously, but also different ways in terms of addressing it when it comes to like these openly white supremacist shooters, like the Christchurch shooter and the Buffalo shooter, and then these school shooters who seem to have. I mean, they could also have the white supremacist rhetoric, but I don't know if that's the driving factor. Do you know what I mean? Like, it certainly plays a role, but I don't know if it is the driving factor. And I feel like those ones were probably more difficult to address. I don't know what to do about those, honestly. I think something is going on there. Honestly, these guys who drop a manifesto, they're much easier to address in terms of it's quite clear that even taking away who influenced them, just like basic, just like instilled countrywide, nationwide rhetoric about like white supremacy and such, like that just gets instilled in those people. Doesn't matter exactly who told them what. In the broader sense, obviously it does if we want to address each single individual one, but in like a broader sense, we're talking about. They could hear it from anywhere, really.
Yeah, and so it's hard to. And again, you have to take everything you see on the internet with a grain of salt. But supposedly, Lanza actually had sort of a very the Sandy Hook guy had a very Alex Jonesian sort of YouTube channel that has been found fairly recently.
Oh, really?
It's on the Knowledge Fight sub. I don't know if you've ever listened to them.
I am familiar with Knowledge Fight. They do great work. That's a great show. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so that
I'm gonna
on
be honest.
their
If you want to drop anything specific like inside jokes, I'm unfortunately I just due to time issues there is no podcast I listen to that often. But I've caught a number of episodes and I really enjoy it.
no inside jokes. Just the that on their subreddit, like that's where so there's a link to what is supposedly Adam Lanza's YouTube channel or Facebook, or I can't remember which off the top of my head, but essentially he and Alex Jones actually had very similar ideologies, so it's kind of darkly ironic.
Wouldn't be surprising, right?
Yeah, and it's kind of darkly ironic that Alex Jones was so intent on calling him a plant and a false flag and everything else, if that's the truth. Of course, I mean, that's the whole point, right, is after all of these things, they try to say, oh, well, no, I'm just saying we should kill them politically. Like, no one should ever go do this because then they don't want to get sued out of existence or whatever, or actually, you know, have the FBI come and take them away or whatever. But you got to keep grifting.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I want to see that now. Actually, I'm not now on the stream. I mean, I want to look into that and see just how deep he was to try to get a better. It sounded like I was like, yeah, let's pull up some conspiratorial videos from Alex Jones right now, but no, that's not what I meant at all. I want to actually dive into it and see what's going on. I mean, I've looked into I have a copy of the Discord logs from the Buffalo shooter to try to understand from my doing what I do more of what's going on there, because I think a lot of that public manifesto was a show for him. It wasn't. I mean, obviously, the Great Replacement theory and that being a driving factor is legit. He even talks about it in Discord logs. But there's a whole bunch of like shit posting meme bullshit, like 4chan meme bullshit in the public manifesto, along with just complete copied and pasted portions of the Christchurch shooters manifesto. So, and I believe the Christchurch manifesto also copy and pasted shit from the Unabombers manifesto. So these guys are all just like 24/7 trolling when it comes to like, they view it as a big whole fucking like edgelord, everything they do bullshit. But obviously, even behind that facade, there's got to be more going on there for them to actually go out into the world and kill people,
Yeah, and I mean, you've said it before, there is, and it's the same reason people join the military, and it's the same reason people join fraternities and whatever, like people, as far as why they get sort of drawn into Chan culture or whatever. It's like everyone's looking for some sort of community, and some people just find really fucking toxic ones that exacerbate their worst tendencies and make normal things that are just abhorrent. And it's it is I think you can talk about how capitalism is sort of, since all of our identities in every way have been commodified, like every little aspect of us, we feel so isolated and alone because we're all just products that we are all desperately searching for somewhere where we feel like we belong. So that probably makes us all more susceptible. But there were always crusades and belonging to fanatic churches and all that kind of stuff. So maybe we're just social creatures that are easily manipulated by large groups. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's certainly. Yeah.
All right, man. So
it's sometimes it's we don't even just for this one specifically, it just happened. We don't even know basic information. Hell, when before the show started, there was a completely different number of dead people. I mean, it's horrendous, horrible stuff. People who lost their lives, kids.
Yeah, it's just awful. It's I don't know how to. It's just processing all this shit is just impossible at this point. It feels just you just start feeling numb to all of it because it's so you feel so helpless that to stop any of it. That
Right.
I don't know. All right, man. So I appreciate the taking my call.
All right. Always a pleasure to talk with. Always a pleasure to talk with. You've called into the show before, right? Your voice sounds familiar.
Yeah, we talked about that crypto scam dating.
Oh, right. Okay, yes, you made it onto the scam economy episode, like a main episode, because that was the first time I used calls to create an episode because it was that great of a second half where I felt like everyone needed to hear it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have a great night. Thanks for calling in. Always a pleasure to talk. Feel free to call in anytime.
All right, thanks, man.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, what's your name? Where you calling from?
Hey, it's Seti, calling from New York as usual.
Hey, M. Seti, what would you like to talk about?
You want to talk about de-radicalization a little bit?
I do.
Okay, so I've mentioned it before. I mean, when I say, back when the first few times I called in, I didn't always used to be very left. As a matter of fact, I used to be extremely right-wing. So, sometimes I see people say things about de-radicalization where I'm just like, it's clearly all just academic book knowledge and, completely off the wall. And like, I see where they're coming from, but it's not experience. But I tried calling in before you went on Tim Pool's show, but, calls were going super, super late that night. So I didn't get through.
Right. Yeah.
But,
it was a long night, and
yeah.
I went on for about 5.5 hours, and still didn't get to everyone's call.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I can kind of walk you through what I think were the important steps for me. And I mean, I think most importantly, what I wanted to say overall is I don't think you can ever in one instance de-radicalize somebody. And
Yeah, you
it's
a long process. It's a long process.
Absolutely. And even if you just say one thing or you make one fascist look bad or you just like raise one point, it sticks with people. And eventually, if you're lucky, that person will see all that stuff that piled up. Because basically, to be far right, to be conservative, to be even Christian, I mean, I'm sure there are Christians listening to this. I'm not very pro-religion these days. But it's to be trapped entirely in a paradigm, in a worldview, where once you're outside of it, you can look back into the smaller worldview and say, wow, that's hilarious. It's like, waking up from a dream. In the dream, the logical actions you were taking made perfect sense in the dream. But then when you wake up, you're like, wow, I was a total idiot. I didn't see reality because the dream restricted so much of that stuff. Your cognition was narrowed, so to speak. And in a lot of ways, the right wing is like that because you operate in this like very singular, very self-contained mindset. And each time you can poke through that is just something else that you can add up to maybe de-radicalize somebody someday. And maybe they can draw on that. And maybe they'll think back and say, oh, that makes sense now. And so, yeah, even if you don't necessarily seem to affect anything or anybody, or people still make fun of you, you don't know what you might, what seed you might have planted in their head. So I think it is, I mean, well, I still haven't watched where you talked to Tim Pool, just because I cannot stand him anymore at all. But it is important, I think, for people who have the chutzpah that you do to go on and, at least make a stand and be seen disagreeing, even if, vocally disagreeing is an important thing.
I appreciate that. He had me on, so I definitely appreciate that opportunity to do that. Obviously, I assume that his audience thinks that thinks what my audience thinks about how I did, but how he did, and that's expected. I'm not looking to change, like you just said. This is not. They could say they own me all they want. They could leave whatever horrible comments to me. I really don't. None of that stuff, honestly, gets to me. Honestly, when you leave the comment on my picture of my kids on Instagram, that one gets to me. At least leave it on a picture of me. But other than that, comments about me don't matter. It don't bother me at all. So I'm happy to do that if I can, get that opportunity. To me, the most important thing is that those few people. I don't know how many, honestly. There were more than I expected, honestly. And to me, just one person would have been a win. I know I've said this all last episode, but you're on the phone with me now, so I might as well talk to you about it because you wanted to call in. One person would have been worth it for me. And again, I don't think one person's going to watch my Tim Pool appearance and say, "That's it, I'm done with Tim Pool." Probably not.
Yeah.
They'll continue watching Tim Pool, and that's fine. If you're listening to this show now because you came from the Tim Pool show and you still watch Tim Pool, I get it. That's cool. That's fine. I'm glad you're here now watching me or listening to the podcast or follow me on Twitter or whatever. That's good. You should take in all these different things. And hopefully you'll hear more of me and people who I share who are probably smarter than me, even on the left. And you'll say, hey, that makes sense. And maybe you're not necessarily going to agree with everything we say. I don't think it's necessary to have to agree with every single thing. But obviously there are certain like tenets. The tent poles, I guess, is the proper way to say it. Not tent poles.
Yeah, well, and
that make you like
thing.
a little bit different than that do make you someone on the more progressive side of things.
Yeah, and I think setting up tent poles and knocking them down gradually is really important. Like, for example, I think the first step for a lot of people was 2008, the financial crisis. That swung pretty much everybody toward the populist end of things, for better or worse. I mean, we have conservative populism, we have left populism, anarchism. And that was like a really big one because that was the first step in like doubting the American dream for a lot of younger people in terms of saying, realizing just how bad. I mean, and before that there was Enron, and I was almost too young to understand what that was. Actually, I probably was too young, but it was the first step in, doubting the corporate line, lobby. It led to the whole beginning to understand the corruption in America and how messed up economics and capitalism can be. And so, like, for example, I think that's probably where I started. So, and then going from there, I think one of the next biggest moments was when I was diagnosed with ADHD in college. I grew up conservative Christian, so my parents were all like, well, my mom particularly. My dad, I swear, is ADHD. But my mom particularly was like, we'll pray for you, get you cured, God will fix your brain. And having been diagnosed with it after struggling my whole life to do anything, it felt like a godsend to me to get a diagnosis and to get medication. So for my mom to be suddenly turning around and saying this sort of thing, like, we'll get you fixed. I'm like, no, I'm fixed now. This is good. It very much felt like erasure. And I'm sure so many queer, neuroatypical people, neurodivergent people they know exactly what I'm talking about. So that pushed me away from religion a bit more. I got more into like the academic side of things, but whatever. Then I think the next big one was when I was listening to Rush Limbaugh in like 2015 or something. And I grew up listening to him, and he was talking about net neutrality. And being a millennial growing up on the internet, I was all for, I was all against what the conservatives were pushing at the time, obviously. And I don't know if that was net neutrality or against net neutrality, because the words they come up with to describe these things, don't mean what it actually is. So I don't know if neutrality was framing from the left or the right, whatever. But so I was very much against the conservative mindset. I'm like, Obama has it right for once. Rush Limbaugh then fed the corporate line and like spouted some crazy bullshit. And I remember at this point in my life, I didn't even swear much. And I just said, Rush, you're off your fucking nut to the radio. And that was another big moment where I was just like, because I'd been talking with so many peers and people online and making friends who thought differently than me or who had their heads screwed on remotely straight, which I didn't. He said something that to him was not a big step, but for me was so out of the blue. I was just like, wait a second, what else has he been wrong about before? He's feeding me a corporate line, And so that was another really big one. And there were another few steps, and shortly thereafter, I met a very good friend who I think is probably listening now. Hi, who really helped de-radicalize me in as much as they
Well, when you say de-radicalize you, I know you're going through some of this. You're giving me some examples, right?
Yeah,
But what are we talking about?
Right-wing conservative Christian, describing, fifth column, third position, being very ethno-nationalist, thinking that, American isolationism, American exceptionalism, being obsessed with martial ideas of honor and stuff. I was never really, the weird thing was I was never really racist. And in the right-wing groups I was in, I was always like kind of the token anti-racist, because I'd be like, people would say like, oh, you look at the FBI crime stats. And I'm like, okay, dude, poverty exacerbates. It just look like drug use in trailer parks. You got to fix societal problems, and then you can work on the racial problems. Me saying that, I'm like, I don't think there are racial problems with, like, no, genetics don't dispose you to, I mean, I guess, like alcoholism stuff, but you know what I'm saying? There's no racial component to crime outside of the societal racial components, And so I was just saying, no, the first thing you need to do is deal with the societal stuff. But they're like, and then they're going on all about joggers and Ahmaud Arbery and how he deserved to be shot and all that conspiracy stuff. So I was never as bad as any of them, but I was in many ways relatively the centrist who enabled all the real whack jobs to feel like they were more normal than they were. And centrists are extremely dangerous. And a lot of right-wing groups have this like embedded centrist who's the useful idiot, or they normalize all the other extremist stuff. So, the centrist is actually on the right. And then so the people way far out on the right say, oh, normal people think like that. And when the truth is, no, you're just a fascist sympathizer, bud.
Right. Yeah. I mean, thank you for sharing that. First of all, that's very interesting stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I knew some people who were like,
maybe one day, I don't.
Oh, sorry.
I don't want to. Oh, tell me that in a second. Keep that in mind. But I think we should, if you'd ever wanted to, again, no pressure. I would love to go deeper into that. Maybe even an episode of talking further about how that went for you and that process of being de-radicalized. I don't think that's a quick phone call like we are on right now, honestly. So I don't want to like.
I think there's a lot of things that you could get into, like the use and outs, and I think that everybody has everybody who's been successfully de-radicalized has their own unique journey. But I think there's some things that are probably similar between most people. So anyway, the interesting part is like the worst person I ever met, a fascist from Indiana, a gay white man. He turned me on to a really good YouTube channel, which I still watch to this day. It's called Agenda Free TV. And the guy, he just covers like breaking news and stuff on YouTube. And he does a very good job of being 99.9% agenda free. The rest percent is, liberal. So it's pretty good. So, but he does a lot of like watching TikTok and watching Periscope and like looking at cameras and stuff on the ground. And so what really finally broke the whole paradigm for me was watching in 2020. And by then, my belief in the government had been destroyed. My belief in industry had been destroyed. My belief in American exceptionalism had been destroyed. So really the only thing holding the whole like right-wing tent up was just the fact that the tent had always been there. It was like Looney Tunes when Coyote steps over a cliff and he doesn't look down, and he's still floating there until he looks down. And the last thing to ever change is your self-identification. So even if you believe nothing that's conservative, you still think you're conservative, and you don't realize you're not. And so the thing that really destroyed everything was seeing the Black Lives Matter riots, and
Right.
going out and seeing that in person. And that was what really proved to me, like, and I don't even really know how my thought process was, but I know it was like in the moments where I was watching that, I'm like, everything I've ever been taught, is completely wrong. And all the crazy leftists my entire life, who I'm very thankful for now, were right. And all the little influences they had on me from childhood through high school and college. And I was just blown away. And I'm like, wow, everything about America is pretty much a lie. And it was incredible. And then right then and there, I was like, wow, okay, I am not even a little bit left. I am very far left. It was not a gradual process because, in fact, for years I'd already been drifting left in one way or another. It was just little tent poles kept getting taken down. And and then at the end, it was just seeing the live footage of the brutality. And I think I don't know, I think a lot of things, but
No, this was, this again. I feel like if I ask you something, we're gonna go further in, and then I'm gonna somehow end up doing a whole episode with you right here and then. And I don't think it's. I think it deserves a bit
fair.
bit more time and an earlier hour, and more people should listen. If you feel, I mean, it sounds like you would be, but just to be
Yeah.
completely honest, no pressure if you don't want to.
Yeah. I have ADHD, and my days drain my brain, so I'll need to put together some notes and stuff. But yeah, if I had some time to prepare, I think we could do more. If you really wanted to.
Right. All right. I would love to. Let's. You have my email?
I don't.
DM me on Twitter, and I'll get you my email. Okay. I'll send you my email address because it's just easier. I mean, I could tell you right now, but people always mess it up. It's Matt MATT at xmattx.com. I'm probably gonna get an easier to remember email. People for some reason can't remember that. But yeah, it's not. I always thought it was simple, but people always mess it up.
Matt at xmatt dot or
there you
Matt
go.
at
See,
xmatt
that is
x
that. DM me, and that way you could just click the link and send me the email.
We'll do.
All right.
Keep staying awesome.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for sharing that. And I look forward to talking with you on a longer form episode.
Yeah, of course.
All right.
Have a good night.
Good night. Geez, I just missed another call. Do. Let's go to. I had some clips, but I honestly don't feel like playing them right now. It doesn't really. They're not of the appropriate mood. Let's put it that way. Let's go back to the phones. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Brian Reed.
Oh, hey,
Dana
Brian.
Howard.
Hey, let me pull you up on the feed. Hey, this is
put me on the feed.
This is Brian, who
Great.
started listening last week after checking me out on Tim Pool's show. Great to see you. Great to see you calling in again. I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, man. Say, I saw it. It looks like I don't know if it's. Hope it's not rude to talk about it. But it looked like your subscriber list went up to like 75% since last week. I thought it was like around 11,000 when I first looked at your site, and then today it's like 21,000.
Oh yeah, for sure. A lot of people.
So maybe you got a boost or something, or
yeah, it's
got a lot of exposure. You got a lot of exposure. It's up to you that people tune in, but they saw you.
No, absolutely no. Don't worry about the wording or anything. Without a doubt, going on Tim Pool's show got some attention. I mean, someone pointed out to me that my episode of his show is doing better than some of his huge guests. Apparently, more people have viewed. Here, let me pull up the thing someone sent me. Someone sent me a screenshot. I don't know how accurate it is now. They sent it to me. I think this was either yesterday or earlier today, like this morning. Here it is. Let me just pull it on the feed. Okay, so apparently the show has been watched more than the Hold on, I wanna make sure I pull it up on the feed so people know I'm not just like pulling numbers out of my ass. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
this is a screenshot that was sent to me.
'Cause you guys had like a marathon episode just off the cuff, like 3.5 hours or something,
Right,
or you guys went a long time. Yeah.
right. This is someone sent me the page. This is not the screenshot that was sent to me, because the screenshot that was sent to me had different numbers. This is the page that someone sent me, that shows, look, 528,000 views on that interview with him. He had Mike Cernovich on a year ago, that has less views. He had Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massey on 3 months ago, that has less views.
Wow.
So a lot of Steve Bannon was on 5 months ago, that has less views. And my discussion with him was just 7 days ago. So I mean, a lot of people tuned in.
Excellent.
So again, if it's his audience tuning in and they thought he did great, that's expected. That's fine. But you being here, that to me is if it was only you here interacting with me and just listening to different views and just getting a better understanding, that's totally worth it for me. And no matter what anyone else thinks, this is a win for me. So I appreciate you calling in.
Yeah. I heard your original speaker an hour ago. Your guest speaker for the official show,
right
before the call-in started, and I thought that was kind of interesting that he was talking about the election denial scene or something. But I'm thinking like we had a election here a couple of weeks ago, and that was like the first time that I actually volunteered to go work there, and just because of the stuff that's gone on for whatever, just the questions that have been around about elections, and I think it's important. It can't hurt. I don't go there, looking for confrontation or anything. But I was like curious, like how it works, and I learned a lot about what it was. Mostly just a long physical day, and just greeting the public, and sometimes.
What was this again specifically? I just want to make sure.
The election day. We had like an election day in Ohio.
Oh, okay.
Ohio.
Oh, see, when I was a college student, actually, I volunteered to do. Well, it's not really volunteer work; they do pay you. But I worked the polls, and you really get an understanding of just like how sort of straightforward and simple it really is. Honestly, I mean, I know every state's a little bit different, but here in New York, it's mostly older people who take the job very seriously. Very seriously. Like, I've seen them tell people to take off pins, whether it was a pin for a Democratic candidate or a Republican candidate. Literally, like, you can't wear that in here. This is, these are the rules. I think a lot of people assume that the people working these polls are like full-time government employees. Like, maybe the people who are at the big election board, who do the final tallies, obviously, but each little district and section and like neighborhood, those are just your neighbors. Those are just people who live nearby, who don't usually do that work, who volunteer to get paid for 2 or 3 days to sit there, tell you how to vote, and then open the machine up and tell you what the number that's there. Like, it's very like people seem to think there's something more, and it's really very straightforward.
Yeah. Oh, actually, I did have one puzzling question. I'll have to look into it if I do it again. And I'm not against doing it again. It's more like, do I have the energy to do it again when the next election comes up?
Right.
Like for a while, I spent at least an hour at the last stage where people come with their ballot filled out, either with a pen, ballpoint pen, or from the little machine, and then they stick it into the. It looks like a little dumpster, but it's got a counter on top, and so it pulls it in and it keeps it, and then it just like turns the count like one higher every time. So I was just looking at that for like an hour, and nothing special. We had 2 of them, and they had different counts on them. But then, like at the end of the day, we're tearing down everything and wanting to put everything away, and the lady had me like stand there next to this counting machine, and I had to like help with the roller tape receipt had to print out. And so I was just standing there holding it for like 15 minutes and make sure it didn't jam because you needed the physical force. But I was watching the counter, and it had all of a sudden there's an additional number. Like we had like 687 people. They showed up personally at our location, but then and that said public count. And then there was another number underneath it while we're doing the receipts, and it said like a record count or something. And so I asked her, well, and that was like 1,532, so it was like more than double. And I asked her, well, what's that number doing on this one, on this machine? And she said, oh, those are people that voted before we started today. And I was just wondering, like, well, that's kind of strange. they started up this one. We had two machines with different numbers that I saw going in, that day. And it's just weird. Like, well, why would this machine have 1,500 things counted? So it's just like a question in my mind, like, why did they pick this machine, or why would it even have to be loaded to a local machine at the high school, and then come out here? And then why is it sitting on there? It didn't make any sense. So I have to get more clarification on that later. And she didn't seem happy. She wasn't. She said it. She was like saying it like she was like either disappointed or not not excited about explaining it or something. But she wasn't mad at me. But it was just like, yeah, that's people that voted before we even set up. So I thought it was just like a weird thing.
What was it? I just want to make sure I'm following. What is the thing you had a question about? Because I want to look into it. What is the thing you had a question?
Yeah. Well, we have they had counting machines at the end where you put your ballot in.
Right.
And it keeps your ballot, and then it ups the counter by one number for every time someone puts a ballot in, the number goes up. So like when I was there for an hour early in midday, it was like 350 on one machine, and then they started another one later, so there was like 50 on the other machine, something like that in that neighborhood. But those are the only two numbers on these two machines. And then when we were shutting down at the end of the day, the number total was there for that particular machine that I was standing in front of for like 15 minutes, but there was a second number underneath it, So that's why I asked her what, and the second number was like more than twice as big as the count of how many people showed up in person. So that was just a strange coincidence.
What state are you in? You don't have to tell me your exact location.
Dayton, Ohio.
Dayton, Ohio. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll look into that to see, because I'm sure, honestly, I bet it's a very, it's good to have questions, but honestly, I bet it's probably a very simple, maybe it's like, that's like the amount of total possible voters in the district or something like that. I don't know. I'm gonna look into this for sure. It's it's an interesting thing to. I think it's important for people to know how this stuff works for sure. That way there is no questions.
Right. Because if there's no questions, then people aren't upset.
Right.
But when there are questions, you got to explain it to them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to look into that. I'm going to make a note. I'm going to reach out to the Ohio State Board, and I'm going to ask. I know I've already asked you 2 times now, but I just want to be super clear.
Actually, Huber Heights, Ohio. It's like a suburb north of Dayton, but it's still Montgomery County. And we had the lady in charge. She has it regularly, I guess, and she was in touch with a couple of her friends at different places, and we had a much better turnout than they were having at the other places in Huber Heights, I guess, at the same time. But it was like Huber Heights, Ohio. It was at the high school, at Wayne High School. That's where I grew up. I went to Wayne High School. It's kind of fun to be back there, and just a kind of strange thing. Yeah, I'd love it if there was some kind of answer.
Yeah, I'll find out and I'll let you know. I'm sure they'll give it to me, and I bet it's I appreciate you calling in. Really happy to see you stick with the show, and I hope it's been interesting for you, and hope to see you again next week.
Yeah. Okay.
Have a great night.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks.
All right, cool. What time is it? How long have I been going now? We're maybe one or two more calls. You know, it's one of those weird days where something happened during the show or right before the show, and it's obviously taken over the news cycle. Um, hey, what's your name? Where you calling from?
It's John Matt. How are you from
Hey,
Peoria?
hey, John, what's up? What was we to talk about?
Just a couple of things. The shooting is pretty top of the list, I guess, because it's most current. I just think it's kind of sad, and like you, I kind of think right now it's not exactly something that's ever going to be addressed. That is trying to have some common sense gun control legislation. The I don't know if you had a chance to look at any of the right-wing Twitter accounts, but like on Crowder's account, people were unironically saying that they should arm teachers and have armed guards at like elementary school. And I remember, and I've had the discussion with people in person, and police get their guns taken all the time. You think a teacher or armed guard, there's not going to be that potential? But it's just kind of the crazy right wing saying a lot of like these things, and it's kind of it's pretty sad. I mean, this is their solution.
Right.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I said right. I mean, yeah.
And the other thing is, I was just going to address. So one of the part-time gigs I had, I've had a lot in Chicago was. I do the polling judge thing, where you got like, a pretty low fee, but also I was a early voting administrator, which is basically a boss of one of the early voting sites. On the those machines, and I don't know if it addresses the previous caller's last question. A lot of those machines, and I don't know the exact, I didn't hear the beginning necessarily of what he was saying, but there's a tally counter, and it just keeps a tally of people who voted on the machine that day. And now I'm talking from the perspective of machines in Illinois and Chicago, not Ohio. And there's like really two major, I think, manufacturers of the machine. I think there's up to 5 if you include all of them. But those tallies are just, how many people have voted on the machine, and they can be disparate. They can be very different if a machine is brought in the later part of the day and has never been voted in. And that's happened occasionally at sites that I've run, because, a machine breaks and you inform the board of election that a machine is broken, so they send you a new machine, and so the new machine has never been voted on before. So and the administrator and judges have to keep account of that tally, and there's a record at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day how many people have voted. I think one aspect why a judge or an administrator might be a little curt or maybe even perhaps annoyed is I've had observers, polling observers, look or interfere with voting. So and sometimes it's bad enough because I might have a judge who I haven't worked with who is not following the law, and I've had to call the board of election and have them fired. So when that happens, and you're talking about someone who should be doing what they're doing, and then you have an observer who's only supposed to be observing, but instead is interfering, sometimes that's a little bit annoying. And I'm not saying that the caller did, but I can see where a judge might be like, this again, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah. Interesting.
I'm sorry.
No. Go ahead.
And I will just also say a couple other things, the paper ballot, if people aren't aware, when you're voting, that thing that goes flying by, and just keeps a record of your electronic vote, that's not identified to the voter. You put your card in, and It's anonymous, basically. Those records, those paper ballots, or rather the paper record, that goes down to the location that, like the board that you're working for, into storage in case there's ever a recount. They can go back to that particular precinct or district and look and see how many counts there are, and actually count by hand by going through that paper and see if it matches the electronic vote. So, I'm not saying that a given machine or a given site, there won't be election fraud. But, this idea that there's like mass voting fraud, it's a little hard to accomplish. Just the logistics of it are, because especially, when, like I say, you're talking about multiple machines or manufacturers, and they might be right next door. Someone that's in reference to one board of election another. There's different board of elections for Cook County versus Chicago, and Chicago's inside. So if you can imagine the outlying counties, and if a city's big enough to have home rule, they're going to have different ways of doing things. So I just wanted to bring that up.
No, thank you. That's thanks for calling and giving your information. Voter issues with voter fraud. We were talking like you could count them on your fingers, honestly.
Right.
And
right. Absolutely.
And interestingly enough,
and
most cases that I've seen are one of two. Honestly, one is someone who was released from prison, not realizing they couldn't vote, and that person is just votes because that's what they thought they could do, and they get thrown in jail, which is horrible for someone who did their time, paid their dues, paid their debt to society. They should be allowed to vote. And honestly, I think there's a failure too in communicating if they think, these people are not going to go to jail again to vote. Like they're not making a stand. They're literally doing it because they're unaware. And that's very smart. But what I'm talking about is out of that handful, it's either that, or if you look at the vast majority of the voter fraud cases over the past year, it seems like they were all Trump supporters. Just look it up. Like I'm not even saying like that. Like literally, people could look it up. The number of Trump supporters who were found to have voted more than once. It's like that handful of cases there are. They were the majority of that handful of cases.
Right, and I'll point out one thing about that too. Felons, not in every state are you barred from voting. So that's also another element of confusion. Like in Illinois, you're not barred from voting. You can vote as as a felon, someone who has been to prison. So, in
statewide, I'm guessing.
Yeah, statewide.
Yeah, probably not for president though, right? Probably not for president, right?
I'm sure because you're voting as a citizen of Illinois.
Oh, that's true.
So if you're in Illinois,
you're right.
Cook County Jail, they have people that go in to administer votes to the inmates. Now, they're in jail. They're not typically felons. So I think while you're spending your time, if you're a felon, you can't vote. But when you're like in Cook County Jail, if you're not a felon, you can definitely vote. So that's one more aspect of that. And when I this was like 10 years ago. Probably about 10 years ago since I last did this. There were a couple cases where judges were found to have participated in voter fraud, and like I say, it's not like massive. It's like a few votes, and they ended up in federal pen. This is not a small crime. They are not. As a judge or administrator or any voting official, you are not going to mess with those votes unless you're willing to go to prison. I'm not talking just a misdemeanor. You're going for a year or more. And I think those cases are pretty rare. They did have one case of a pastor who drove his church of elderly to vote, and he got charged. I don't know what the disposition of the case happened.
Oh, there's
But,
all sorts of laws that people don't know. But you think you're doing something again? I don't know. Maybe that person shouldn't have even been arrested, and they were being heavy-handed in a state where they didn't want, certain people to vote.
Right.
It is amazing. You think we live in a country where you just want to get the most people out to vote. Like voting should be. From my upbringing, voting was encouraged. Voting was taught that this is something that people fought for and died for and
Absolutely.
and became free people to do it. And I should be lucky to be able to vote. I should feel lucky and it's a honor. I should be an honor and a privilege to be able to vote. I don't, that's why also I sort of try to stay away from like if people ask me my personal opinion, voting is not something you do as an emotional or a personal. My personal opinion is voting is strategic.
Yes.
During a primary, that's when you can go, all out, balls to the wall, and vote for who you truly want. And if they win, that's awesome. That's great. And if they don't, though, I think then you have to consider strategically to get what you want. Who do you vote for to get closest to that, or closest to help the people who you also claim to care about and advocate for and ally with? That's my own personal opinion. But I don't like the whole pushing people or like yelling at them or wagging your finger at people. I think people should just vote. Should go out and vote.
Right.
Right.
I think, I think there is an argument to say, that, well, gee, we've been screwed by both parties and what's the point? But then, you don't really get to argue then afterwards about where, a terrible politician, at least if you make that vote, in my opinion, anyway, you at least some footing to say, this person really stinks, whether you voted for him or not. You participated. And I mean, you can say, well, yeah, you're participating in a corrupt system. Well, that's how you actually, outside of voting, try to correct that system, I think. And I think Sam Cedars made the point many times that, this isn't high school. This isn't like, we're talking about, well, you like Johnny and I like Sally, but Sally's not friendly with Johnny. This is not that kind of thing anymore. We're supposedly adults, and we should be making these decisions in the full realization that there are a lot of things external to what we can control and make that a vote accordingly.
Right. Huh.
Hello? Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyway, but yeah, I just wanted to mention those two things. And I don't know if you talked too much about the crypto thing, but it is pretty amazing the last couple of weeks that, and I'm glad you're covering it.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I think it's, there's a lot going on right now, honestly. It's sort of like, I don't even, sometimes I'm trying to figure out what topic to do on the show. And I'm thinking like, I mean, look, today, I thought the state legislature report from, was super, and I'm, it's, I think it ties a lot into everything, honestly, that we're dealing with right now. I mean, what you see going on in Texas, what you see going on in right now, like literally with the shooting, what you see going on in Florida with the LGBT stuff. I mean, it's all down to the states right now, what we're seeing. And when Roe gets struck down, like it's looking like it's going to happen, people really need to start paying attention to state races as if we're talking president of the United States elections. Seriously.
And I don't know who had a segment, but they were talking about how state legislatures run by the far right are just incubators for how these guys get onto the national stage. And you look at like Boebert and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and although they did, I don't believe served in legislator, but I believe there's going to be more of these guys. I just wanted to mention quickly. I know you had a caller who she was like 65 who called in, and I'm like 1 year, I think, older than Sam Cedar, so a boomer. But I am technically a boomer. I was 9 when Roe v. Wade came down. My mother worked in hospitals. She was a medical technologist for about 47 years. And I knew women that had to go get abortions that would be referred now, or back then, as back alley abortions, that weren't sanctioned by the state or legal. And one of the things that really bothers me is, these rulings aren't going to get rid of abortion. They're just going to make people do things on the quiet, and women are going to die. I mean, people like Jimmy Dore think there's no consequence to, electing someone like Trump, where you get 3 of these judges in. Women are going to die because of these decisions. I mean, it's very predictable. We went through it before, and we're going to go through it again if they get their way.
Right.
All right.
Thanks for the call. It's a lot of things that we need to pay attention at once. And I think the overarching theme should be, honestly, if you're going to take something away from today and from the past couple of months and from this episode, it's you start paying attention to what's going on in your state in terms of statewide races. We need to. The right's been doing it. They knew. They knew. They've been waiting for it to all line up and
coalesce. Yeah.
And they've been strategizing and waiting for this moment, and they're successful. They won this this part of it. They were on point in terms of strategically of what you need to do to take over here, and we got to catch up, but we got to do it. We got to do it. Yeah. All right. I really appreciate the call.
Thank you, man.
Have a great night.
You too. Bye.
All right. I think we're going to call that a night, folks. I don't think there's any more phone calls right now. Oh, I'll take this one from Kowalski and then I'll read some super chats. Hey, what's your name? Where are you calling from? Hello.
Hey, it is Kowalski from Nebraska.
Hey, Kowalski, what's up? What would you like to talk about?
Uh-oh. Oh, good. You can hear me. Hey, I actually want to bring this up with the last caller talking about voting machines. So about 2 years ago, I went to the Republican State Convention in Nebraska, and I got to listen to the Secretary of State talk to a voter who was basically talking about how the machines were rigged. There is a voting machine, or the software, I suppose, that is made by an Omaha-based firm that the state uses. And so in the Republican Party, there are nut jobs who think that Omaha was stolen because Omaha went for Ben Sasse, the Republican senator, but went for Joe Biden, the Democratic president. And I literally got to watch in real time the Secretary of State of Nebraska try to balance between, oh yes, the election was definitely stolen, but not the Omaha-based firm. They weren't part of that. It was the other people that were part of that, which is hilarious because, and I've said this before, I'm pretty sure like most of the people in charge of like the state of Nebraska at the moment are like more of the neocons. They're not these, QAnon folks yet. But the problem is that I think the people who drink the Kool-Aid are being like, they're being like, the main part of the party is trying to bring them in and not realizing how freaking dangerous bringing in addicts really are. And they are probably not prepared for when these people actually start getting put into positions of power.
Right.
So yeah, like your statewide offices, very important. And just remember, these QAnon folks, they are the kind of people who will bring up like great replacement. That was the first time in person I had ever heard anybody like basically just use anti-Semitic tropes. It like the Omaha thing, the Secretary of State had to listen to the person actually bring up, well, Soros is one of the people who owns part of like the firm. And like, it wasn't even true. I don't even think it's a publicly traded company. And it's like, that's how diluted this stuff is. And I really don't think that the Republican establishment is really ready for all of this.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, let's go back actually a little bit to your what you first mentioned in the first half of when you first called in. So you know of someone who voted Republican and then like statewide and then voted for Joe Biden for president.
That's what Omaha mostly did.
Oh, that's what
because
Omaha mostly
Nebraska-
did. I'm sorry, I thought you said.
Oh no. Actually, I do know a couple people where that would have
But
been the case, but-
okay, yeah, I was gonna ask like if you because if you knew some I'm wondering what their is it the old idea of I give 50% of my vote to this party, 50% of my vote to that party, and then we'll get something down the middle and make everybody happy. Is it that mindset?
No, I think it was more along the lines of these people were like predominantly conservative, but for them, Joe Biden was conservative enough, and their religious like upbringings could not compel them to vote for Trump again. Like, I do think that, and there's probably someone should probably look into this, but if I had to guess, there is probably a very big distinction between like the religious views of people in the old Confederacy versus the rest of the country. And particularly the Great Plains has a historical legacy of being far more progressive. So like we're a bit different than like, say, your Ohio's or like Indiana. When you start getting a little further west, I think it's more of like community based as opposed to like the whole wealth kind of like prosperity gospel stuff that is more common in the South. So I think that played a lot into it. But honestly, like just from a lot of the people I've talked with, I think a lot of like conservatives are getting quite scared of the reactionaries because I don't truly believe in like progress or populism on the right. I view them as just like reactionaries. Because like a conservative doesn't want to take like the country back, in my opinion. A conservative just wants status quo. A reactionary wants to like get rid of gay marriage, get rid of women's suffrage, that sort of thing. And I mean, they exist, but I think those people actually scare conservatives to a small degree. It's just the people in power don't mind the extra voters, but I don't really think they fully understand the can of worms they're dealing with. I think they are under the impression this is just another Tea Party movement, and it's really not.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's an interesting dynamic for sure, and Republicans obviously don't really care. At the end of the day, they get the vote of whoever that is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like the Republican establishment is just desperately grasping for numbers, and they're starting to let people in that are going to, like, if they ever get the reins of power, like, I'm not entirely sure what they would do with it, but I mean, let's just hope the systems work and they all get arrested when they start, breaking the law. But it would be interesting if they win big in the midterms. Though I'm going to be a bit optimistic on this one. I don't think the Republicans are going to do well. Like, I think right now, like the primaries have got like the Democrats all stirring because it's kind of weird, but I think like a lot of the business community are terrified of the Republicans because they're unstable and are just like in a state of flux, and the Democrats are trying to reach out to them. And that's angering the more like working class base that's like the foundation of the Democratic Party. But after the primaries, I think the party will more or less coalesce into a cohesive force by the election. Like, I think people are still absolutely terrified of like Trumpism. And I honestly think that will hold by December, like, or by November during the election. Like, I mean, just like, especially with there being the millennials that I know that are even self-described conservatives, they're terrified of this kind of stuff. And I mean, there's a lot of right wingers in Nebraska, and if they're terrified of the reactionaries, I mean, I would imagine that's probably holding true in a lot of the other parts of the country.
Yeah.
So I'm optimistic that they'll actually be able to hang on. That won't do us any good for the courts, but, you know, any future Supreme Court justice would at least not be, you know, a lunatic.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And oh yeah, food situation has not improved, has gotten worse. It's going to be really bad. I might reach out to you on a direct message here soon if I come up with something, but I think a lot of people are starting to write on it, so you might be better off looking for like a professional who's researching on that. But it's going to be a much bigger story pretty soon.
Really?
Yeah, there's pretty much no way at this point we're going to have a record crop in the Midwest. Like, it's just too cold, it's too wet, we're too far behind. The Western Hemisphere will be fine, but it's just all the countries dependent on imports are going to be probably scraping the bottom of their reserves just to try to purchase things on the international markets. It's going to be a pretty close one. That, and there's like no prospect of there being enough fertilizer in the next 2 years. So,
do you have anyone in mind who I should talk to about it?
I'll look. Not off the top of my head. The thing is, most of my research, I just go like on the USDA and do my own stuff. But I'll look into it and see if I can't find somebody. My cat just attacked me. What a jerk.
All right.
But yeah, everyone should keep that on their radars. And yeah, I think that's it. I'm not sure where this rambling was meant to go, but we're here. So.
Right. No, I think, yeah, no, thanks for the call, Kowalski. I you know, one more thing to get to, right? One more wonderful thing that's going to happen. Wonderful. But, you know, here we are together doing, you know, going through it all together, right?
Yeah. And when the famine hits, we'll print an NFT and somehow that'll save us all.
Right. When the famine hits, we could all just, go to Kowalski's farm, right? And you'll have food saved up and rationed for everybody, right?
Everyone will have to give up their veganism, but we'll make it work.
Oh, I don't have to worry about that. So have a great night, Kowalski.
You too. Have a good one.
All right, folks. Let's call it a night for the calls, at least. You know, I'm doing the show, and also while doing the show, I'm seeing all this right-wing disinformation go around about the shooting. Of course, they're trying to blame trans people by falsely claiming that the shooter in Texas, the school shooter, was a trans person. There's been 2 sets of photos that they've shared around, and I can say that both of those sets of photos are false. They are not of the shooter. And it's horrible that they're doing this shit to basically just attack trans people, troll trans people, fuck with trans people, get something really bad to happen to trans people. I mean, horrible stuff. All right, let's go to some super chats. This is happening all over social media, like on Twitter, Instagram. I've seen it on all the, yeah, not good. Kowalski with a super sticker. Thank you, buddy. And then we got Jerry Ty with a $10 super chat. Past few days and today have been extremely dark. We need more leftist voices like Matt's Majority Report and others. Here's a super chat to continue the good work and to make myself feel better. I appreciate that, Jerry. Ezekiel Mordecai with a $20 super chat. We are all doomed. We are, but also we're not. We'll you know, let's power through it, you know? I've been Macranda. Matt, do you read these? I absolutely do. I used to read them throughout, but lately I've been getting so many calls that one call after another, I don't want to miss them. And the super chats ain't going anywhere like the calls are. So I get to them towards the end. But I'll try to read them as they come in now. But maybe we just got to keep them towards the end. I don't know. This is how it's been working out. Brian Lead with a $25 super chat. Great call-in channel, Matt. Keep it going. Thank you. I appreciate it. Tokyo Hans with a, is this $500 yen? I'm assuming, right? I don't know what that turns into. Whatever it is, I thank you no matter what. I don't care how much it is. I don't care if it's $1.50, $500, whatever it is. So thank you. But I'm interested. What is 500 yen? Cool. Let's go to Brian Lead again. $15 super chat. Like, geez, buddy, you're really being generous today. I appreciate it. Election day question. Public count was around 687. Reportable count appeared at closing only. Below public count, reportable was around 1532. Votes on the machine from the before we started the day. I'm not sure. I'm going to just reach out and ask what those numbers mean. Cool. Let's go to the Twitch stream now. You can still get your super chats in. YouTube.com/MattBinder. Over on Twitch, we got, let's see. Serious Business just resubscribed at tier 1. Thank you so much. Subscriber for 7 months. Process Psych with a 5-month subscription in a row. Whoa. With a and Process Psych says Dave, right? Dave from Jamaica making his appearance earlier. Calm Like a Tom with 2 community sub gifts. Thank you so much. Really appreciate the support. The Man in Black just subscribed with Prime. Thank you so much. Ascade 1989 subscribe with Prime. Daredevil subscribe with Prime. Mole3 Earth subscribe with Prime. Ezekiel Mordecai subscribe with Prime. Leet Shuda subscribe with Prime. Great Walt 22 subscribe with Prime. Thank you all so much. Really appreciate the support. And then we got, let's see. Oh, let's go thank the patrons too while we're at it, right? How am I not gonna shout out the patrons? Never. Absolutely. They're the first ones that come to mind usually. Over the past week, we've brought in, let's see. Spencer L, Anthony R, Gerard M, Richard M, Brian B, Danny L, Joseph T, and Michael P. Thank you all so much for becoming patrons. Again, can't do it without you patrons. Can't do it without you Twitch subscribers. Can't do it without you YouTube super chatters. You guys make this show possible. And without any further ado, wait, that's what you say when you're like, that's what you say when you're like something's coming up that you're, so further ado, no, it doesn't make any sense. We are going to just say goodnight. Oh, who should I raid on Twitch? There's like 20 different things happening right now online that I'm trying to, while also obviously focusing on you guys, number one. Ponderosaphine with a resubscription at tier 1 for 5 months. 5 months, gang. Rise up with a smiley face, says Ponderosaphine. Thank you so much. Who should I raid? I'll be happy to raid anyone you tell me to raid. Seriously. I want to spread the... Kamar Nadir says, raid a black creator. I'd be happy to. Who's on right now? Black creator that's on right now. I'll be happy to. I love raid. I don't remember if this was last Doomed or last Scam Economy, but I raided Progressive Brat, a small channel run by a feminist woman, and she said it was the biggest raid she ever got. I sent like 120 people that day or something, and she was so pumped. It made me so happy. I want to raid people who aren't used to getting a larger audience. I mean, I don't have the biggest Twitch audience, but apparently it's bigger than others. So I want to support those people. I also raided Riverboat Jack last week. So who else should I raid? All right, let's see who else. Let's see who's on right now. I don't know enough Twitch streamers, honestly. I need to get someone needs to bring me a list of Twitch streamers that stream during the time I do my show. So let's do I don't know, if Riverboat Jack is talking about the shooting, then maybe I should send people to Riverboat Jack. But I haven't done Frogan in a bit. I'll do Frogan. It's been a while since I've raided Frogan, so why not, right? What's Frogan talking about right now? Oh, there was another super chat? Let me get to it. Don't want to miss that super chat. Oh my God. $20 super chat from Callenshaw Indie Games. Hey Matt, first time viewer. I subbed because I like how you held yourself on Timcast. I don't know how much we disagree yet, but I appreciate shows that take call-ins. So maybe we'll discuss someday. Take care, dude. I love that. That makes me so happy. That's all I want. That's really all I wanted. I don't misrepresent myself. I'm exactly who I say I am. And that's what sort of bothers me about other channels. It's my biggest beef with Tim. If he wants to espouse, right-wing politics, it's a free country. He's got a YouTube channel. He could do that. I just think he needs to be a little bit more straight up. He stop being that fence sitter, that milquetoast fence sitter. That's really my biggest thing. I mean, I appreciate he had me on to discuss. I hope we could do it again, truly. So thanks a lot, Callenshaw. I hope you call in for real. I really hope you do. Even if you don't agree with me in certain aspects, I hope you'll at least walk away with an understanding, of where I'm coming from, and I'll walk away with understanding from where you're coming from. All right. That's the show. And I will raid Frogan. And I will see you all next time on Doomed.